Picture a city at its peak. The grand plazas are bustling, the air thick with the smoke of ceremonial fires and the murmur of 1,000 voices. The ruling lord ascends the pyramid temple, silhouetted against the sky, a living conduit to the gods. Then, in a span of time that feels both impossibly long and startlingly short, the voices fall silent, the fires go cold. The jungle, which has always waited patiently at the city's edge, begins its slow, relentless reclaiming. Vines snake over carved stone thrones, tree roots crack magnificent stairways, and the great city is swallowed whole, its memory fading into legend. This is the haunting reality of the ancient Maya, a civilization of staggering genius that mastered astronomy, mathematics, and architecture, only to see its heartlands largely abandoned, leaving behind enigmas wrapped in stone and shrouded in green. We often hear about the famous sites like Chichen Itza or Tikal, but what about the ones that didn't make it into the guidebooks, the ones that were lost for over 1,000 years? Today, we are venturing off the map to uncover 25 forgotten temples of the ancient Maya. These are not just piles of rubble being slowly consumed by the jungle, they are frozen moments in time. Each moss-covered stone is a page in a story we are only just beginning to read. These structures were the epicenters of cosmic power, places where rulers became gods, where the cycles of the sun and Venus were charted with impossible accuracy, and where the fate of kingdoms was decided. To understand these temples is to understand the Maya worldview itself, a complex tapestry of creation, ritual, politics, and a profound connection to the cycles of nature that ultimately could not save them from a mysterious collapse. We are about to become explorers, peeling back layers of vines and earth to reveal secrets that have been waiting in the shadows. This journey will take us deep into the heart of the Maya world, to places where the silence is so profound you can almost hear the echoes of the past. We will stand in plazas that haven't seen a ceremonial procession in centuries and look upon facades where the stucco masks of gods still peer out, their expressions enigmatic after all this time. We'll explore the reasons these incredible places were forgotten and what their rediscovery tells us about the resilience of human memory and the relentless curiosity that drives us to seek answers. So, if you're ready to step into a world of lost cities and ancient mysteries to see what lies beyond the well-trodden paths, you are in the right place. Let's begin our countdown of 25 temples that time almost erased, and in doing so, rediscover a civilization that continues to captivate and mystify us. And so our journey begins not with a whisper, but with a statement of pure, overwhelming ambition. Deep within the dense, isolated rainforest of northern Guatemala, in a region known as the Patane, lies El Mirador. Reaching this place is an expedition in itself, a journey that reinforces just how completely a city can vanish from the world. But the reward for that trek is a sight that defies belief, the Danta complex. We have to pause for a moment on that word, complex, because Danta isn't just a single pyramid. It's an entire mountain of human endeavor, a sprawling acropolis built atop a massive, artificially raised platform. When you talk about sheer volume, the amount of stone, earth, and labor packed into this structure, many archaeologists argue Danta is the largest pyramid anywhere on the planet, surpassing even the Great Pyramid of Giza. To truly grasp its scale, picture this. The entire structure rises over 200 feet high, but that's just the peak. The base of the complex is so wide that if you were to stand at its foot, the top would seem to touch the clouds. Its total volume is estimated to be an astonishing 9 million cubic meters. That is more than enough material to build 10 of the largest sports stadiums we have today. And the most incredible part, this monumental achievement was largely completed centuries before the Common Era, during what's known as the Preclassic period. While famous sites like Tikal and Palenque were still small villages, El Mirador was already a thriving, sprawling metropolis, a preeminent capital of the Maya world. This fact turns our traditional timeline on its head. The peak of Maya power and architectural genius may have come much earlier than we once thought. The construction of La Danta required a society of immense organization and resources. Imagine thousands of workers quarrying stone, hauling it without the wheel or draft animals, and moving millions of tons of earth and rubble to create this artificial landscape. They were building not just a temple, but a symbolic sacred mountain, a axis mundi connecting the earthly realm with the world of the gods. Its summit would have been the stage for rituals witnessed by tens of thousands of people gathered in the plazas below, a testament to the power of the rulers who could command both the labor of men and the forces of the cosmos. Yet, this is where the central mystery of El Mirador deepens. By around the year 150 of the Common Era, this mighty city, this preeminent capital, was in a state of serious decline. Within a few more generations, it was all but abandoned, its grand pyramids left to the jungle a full 600 years before the wider, better-known classic Maya collapsed. Why would a city of such obvious power and sophistication simply walk away from its greatest creation? Was it environmental disaster like drought or soil exhaustion from feeding such a large population? Was it warfare or a shift in trade routes that left it isolated? The silence of La Danta is absolute, and its empty plazas pose a question that continues to challenge our understanding of the rise and fall of civilizations. It stands as a ghostly titan, a reminder that even the greatest empires are subject to forces we are still struggling to comprehend. But the story of El Mirador isn't only told in the staggering scale of its pyramids, it's also written in the fragile, colorful art that adorned them. While La Danta's size speaks to the city's power, the intricate stucco friezes and murals discovered there whisper its deepest beliefs. Imagine archaeologists not with giant excavators, but with fine brushes and dental tools, carefully sweeping away centuries of soil to reveal a wall of carved and painted plaster. This is where the true magic of El Mirador comes to light. One of the most breathtaking discoveries is a frieze that seems to depict scenes from the Popol Vuh, the sacred Maya book of creation. It's vital to understand that the Popol Vuh text we have today was written down after the Spanish conquest, but the stories within it are ancient. To find their imagery carved onto a temple wall at El Mirador, a city that fell into silence over 1,000 years earlier, is like finding a direct line to the very foundation of Maya thought. This frieze isn't just a decoration, it's a theological statement in stucco. It portrays the hero twins, Hunahpu and Xbalanque, central figures in the creation epic who journeyed into the Maya underworld, Xibalba, to challenge the gods of death. Seeing their story depicted here in such an early and powerful city confirms that these narratives were not later inventions but were core to Maya identity from the very beginning. The artwork serves as a powerful bridge, connecting the preclassic period with the classic Maya we know better, showing a continuous cultural and religious thread. For the people of El Mirador, these temples were not mere buildings, they were physical representations of the mythical landscape. The pyramid itself was the Wits, the sacred mountain of creation, and its interior may have symbolized the dark cave entrance to the underworld. By adorning it with scenes of the hero twins' victory over death, the rulers were making a profound claim that they, too, held power over the cycles of life and death, and that their authority was sanctioned by the gods themselves. Preserving these masterpieces is a race against time. The stucco, a mixture of lime and sand, is incredibly vulnerable. Once exposed to the air after more than 2,000 years of being protected by the earth, it begins to dry out and crumble. A sudden tropical downpour can erase delicate details in minutes. Archaeologists and conservators work with the urgency of emergency room doctors, stabilizing the friezes with chemical consolidants and building protective shelters over them. It's a constant battle against the very jungle that preserved them for so long. This painstaking work gives us an unparalleled window into early Maya religion and iconography. The style of the carvings, the specific headdresses worn by the figures, and the symbolism of the animals all provide clues. They suggest that the rulers of El Mirador were already using a sophisticated system of royal portraiture and divine association that would become the standard for Maya kings for the next millennium. They weren't just building the biggest city, they were codifying the visual language of power and faith that would define their civilization. The silence of El Mirador's abandonment is made even more poignant by the vibrant stories left behind on its walls, frozen narratives of creation and triumph that now stand as a testament to a spiritual world as monumental as the architecture that contained it. From the sprawling, ancient metropolis of El Mirador, we now travel forward in time more than 800 years and journey to a place of dramatic geography and relentless political intrigue. Our path leads us to the Uxmal River, the natural border between modern-day Guatemala and Mexico. This wasn't a gentle waterway, it was a vital and often dangerous artery of trade and warfare in the classic Maya world. And perched on a grand, horseshoe-shaped bend in the river, defended by steep, jungle-clad hills, lies the powerful city-state of Uxmal. To arrive here is to feel the tension of a fortified kingdom. You don't simply walk to Uxmal, you approach by boat, hearing the howler monkeys roar from the canopy, a sound that must have served as a natural alarm system for the city's inhabitants. It is here, in this charged atmosphere, that we find Temple 33, a monument that is less about overwhelming size and more about a very specific personal story of legacy carved in stone. Temple 33 was the final resting place and the ultimate statement of power for one of Uxmal's greatest rulers, a king known as Bird Jaguar IV. Unlike the solitary titan of Danta, this temple was part of a dense architectural conversation within the city's main acropolis, facing other important structures across a ceremonial plaza. Its most striking feature, even from a distance, is its magnificent roof comb. Imagine a stone latticework screen soaring high above the temple's roofline, not just for decoration but as a billboard for the gods and the people below. This intricately pierced structure would have been covered in a thick layer of bright red stucco and might have held modeled figures, making the king and his symbols visible for miles around, a brilliant crimson silhouette against the green jungle. It was a permanent, unmissable advertisement of Bird Jaguar's authority. But the true historical treasure of this temple, the element that allows its story to be read aloud today, is its hieroglyphic stairway. This was not merely a set of steps, it was a public record chiseled into the very path leading to the sacred space. Each step was carved with glyphs, creating a continuous text that chronicled the king's military victories and his right to rule. For the ancient Maya, history was power, and by inscribing his achievements directly into the architecture, Bird Jaguar was making his legacy a literal foundation of the state. He was ensuring that every priest, every noble, and every visitor who ascended to the temple would walk upon the story of his greatness. This stone narrative cemented his place in the cosmic order. However, the most poignant chapters of this story are found on the temple's lintels, the large stone beams that span the doorways. 3 of these lintels, known as lintels 1, 2, and 3, were masterpieces of Maya art. They depicted critical rituals performed by Bird Jaguar IV, most importantly a ceremony known as the Vision Quest, where the king would draw blood from his own body to conjure a vision serpent, a massive, undulating creature rising from a bowl of blood. From the serpent's mouth would emerge an ancestor or a god sanctioning the king's rule. These carvings were meant to show that Bird Jaguar's power was not just political, it was divine, earned through personal sacrifice and direct communication with the supernatural realm. Tragically, these specific lintels were looted from the temple in the 20th century and now reside in the British Museum. Their absence from the doorway is a palpable wound, a silent reminder of the cultural loss that accompanies the illicit antiquities trade. Yet, because they were so carefully documented, their imagery and glyphs provide an incredibly detailed account of the rituals that legitimized this king's dynasty. Temple 33, therefore, tells a story of a kingdom perpetually on a war footing. Bird Jaguar IV ascended the throne during a time of instability, and much of his reign was dedicated to fierce campaigns against rival city-states like Piedras Negras just up the river. The temple's art and texts are filled with images of captured prisoners, their arms bound, often awaiting sacrifice. This wasn't simple brutality, it was a necessary political theater. Publicly demonstrating the defeat of enemies and the favor of the gods was essential for maintaining the loyalty of lesser nobles and intimidating rivals. The temple is the stone embodiment of a ruler fighting to secure his lineage in a world where power was constantly contested. It stands not as a serene monument to eternal peace, but as a fierce declaration of survival, a chapter from a history written in conquest, blood, and a desperate hope that stone memory would outlast the fragile fortunes of kings. Yet, for every monumental city like El Mirador that dominates the historical landscape, there are others whose stories were nearly erased completely, waiting silently for centuries to be rediscovered. Our next destination is one such place, a city that was lost not just to the jungle, but to memory itself, until a team of archaeologists literally stumbled upon its secrets. Travel with us now to the dense lowland forests of northeastern Guatemala, to the forgotten city of Cival. Unlike the imposing, known giant, Cival was a phantom. Its name was unknown, its history a blank page. It was only in the late 1990s that researchers surveying the area around the larger site of Homel began to notice an unusual pattern of hills. These weren't natural formations, they were pyramids and platforms completely swallowed by vegetation, hinting at a sprawling urban center that predated many of its famous neighbors. This was Cival, a major preclassic power that thrived for centuries and then, around the year 100 of the Common Era, simply vanished, its existence wiped clean from the record. The heart of Cival's rediscovery and the key to understanding its people is its E-group complex. To the modern eye, an E-group might look like just a wide plaza flanked by a long, low platform on the west and a tall pyramid on the east. But for the ancient Maya, this was a precisely engineered celestial machine. This specific arrangement of buildings functioned as a sophisticated astronomical observatory, one of the earliest and most important designs in the Maya world. On the equinoxes, the spring and autumn days when light and dark are perfectly balanced, someone standing on the western platform would witness the sun rise directly over the apex of the eastern pyramid. It was a moment of cosmic alignment, a confirmation that the universe was in order. This wasn't just abstract science, it was the bedrock of survival. By tracking the sun's journey with such precision, the priests of Cival could dictate the agricultural calendar, telling the farmers exactly when to plant and when to harvest, thereby controlling the very lifeblood of the city. This complex proves that from their earliest days, the Maya were master sky watchers, weaving the movements of the heavens directly into the fabric of their daily life and leadership. But the true showstopper at Cival, the discovery that left archaeologists breathless, was found on the sides of the main pyramid within this E-group. As they carefully excavated the structure, they uncovered not just stone, but enormous, brilliantly modeled stucco masks. These were no small decorations. They are some of the largest pre-Columbian masks ever found, each standing over 15 feet high. They flank the central stairway facing the rising sun, and they depict a powerful early version of the Maya sun god. The features are both awe-inspiring and intimidating. Wide, oval eyes that see all, a broad, flattened nose, and a snarling mouth with fangs that curve upward, revealing a central tooth. The entire visage is framed by symbols of vegetation and life, identifying this deity as the source of warmth, light, and ultimately sustenance. What makes these masks so significant is their staggering age. They were created around 300 years before the Common Era, making them one of the oldest representations of a Maya deity ever discovered. Their style is raw and powerful, less refined than the art of the later classic period, but possessing a monumental primal energy. They were originally painted in vivid shades of red, black, and white, a polychrome spectacle that would have been visible across the plaza, gleaming in the dawn light. For the people of Cival, these masks were not mere art. They were the living embodiment of the god himself, witnessing the equinox sun rise directly above them. The entire ceremonial complex was a theater designed to demonstrate the ruler's unique relationship with this life-giving force, proving his ability to mediate between the people and the cosmos. This makes the silence that followed all the more profound. Around the 1st century of the Common Era, at the very peak of its architectural and artistic achievement, Cival was abandoned. The evidence points to a sudden and violent end. Archaeologists found that the great stucco masks were deliberately desecrated and buried, their faces smashed and covered with tons of rubble in what appears to be a ritual termination. This was a common practice when one city conquered another, a way of symbolically killing the patron gods of a defeated rival. The mystery is that we don't know who the conquerors were. Was it a rising neighbor like El Mirador itself, or was it an internal revolt, a popular uprising that turned against the ruling class and their gods? The abandonment of Cival, along with other preclassic centers, reveals a volatile, tumultuous world long before the famous classic-era kingdoms. It shows that the Maya landscape was a chessboard of competing city-states that could rise to glorious heights and then be brutally knocked down, their stories buried and waiting for a future generation to piece them back together. Cival stands as a ghost from the dawn of Maya civilization, a reminder that their history is far older and far more fragile than we ever imagined. From the tumultuous river kingdom of Uxmal and the ghostly preclassic city of Cival, we now travel to a site that represents the very pinnacle of classic Maya artistry and elegance, though our focus will be on a quieter corner of its story. Nestled in the foothills of the Chiapas highlands, watered by numerous streams and waterfalls, Palenque is often described as the most beautiful of all Maya cities. It is a place of graceful proportions and exquisite stonework where the jungle seems to embrace the architecture rather than conquer it, while the magnificent temple of the inscriptions with the legendary tomb of King Pakal rightly draws the crowds. Our attention turns to a smaller, equally intriguing structure just a short walk away, the Temple of the Count. The temple's name itself is a doorway into a curious chapter of archaeological history. It was named not for an ancient Maya king, but for a flamboyant and eccentric European explorer named Jean-Frédéric Maximilien de Waldeck, who claimed the title of Count. In the 1830s, decades before proper excavations began, Waldeck camped out inside this very temple for nearly 2 years. Imagine this figure, a man who professed to be an artist and an antiquarian, living amidst the ruins, surrounded by the sounds of the jungle and the silent stares of stone carvings. His time there was less about scientific inquiry and more about romantic era fascination, a period when Europeans viewed such ruins through a lens of exotic mystery and often wild speculation. Waldeck's legacy is a complicated one, preserved in the detailed but highly imaginative drawings he produced of Palenque sculptures and hieroglyphs. His artistic hand was heavily influenced by the classical art of Egypt and the Mediterranean. When he drew Maya figures, he often gave them European features, draping them in robes that looked more Roman than Mayan. He interpreted the intricate glyphs not as a written language, which it truly is, but as purely symbolic and mystical decorations. These fanciful illustrations, published in Europe, became the first glimpse many people had of Maya civilization, and they profoundly shaped early perceptions. For a time, they fueled bizarre theories that the Maya were actually a lost tribe of Egyptians or survivors from the sunken continent of Atlantis. While we now know these ideas are fictions, Waldeck's work, for all its inaccuracies, played a crucial role in sparking public interest and convincing a skeptical world that sophisticated ancient cultures existed in the Americas. But what of the temple itself, stripped away from the Count's romanticized narrative? Architecturally, the Temple of the Count is more modest than its famous neighbor. It lacks the grand stairway and secret tomb of the Temple of the Inscriptions. Instead, it presents a tall, narrow structure with a prominent roof comb, characteristic of Palink's late classic style. Its true significance lies in its place within the city's timeline and its residential function. Archaeologists believe this temple was not a royal funerary monument, but rather an elite residence or an administrative complex, possibly for a high-ranking noble or a secondary lineage within the ruling dynasty. It was built later than the core group of temples around the palace, indicating that Palink was still expanding and developing even in the later stages of its history. Excavations within and around the temple have yielded a different kind of treasure than gold and jade, but one that is equally valuable to historians, evidence of daily life. Findings include ceramic vessels for food storage and serving, tools made of obsidian, and remnants of domestic activities. These artifacts help paint a more complete picture of Palink society, moving beyond the kings and their grand rituals to understand the lives of the aristocratic class that supported the throne. They reveal a city that was not just a ceremonial center but a living, breathing community with a complex social hierarchy. The temple's strategic location, offering a view over a significant part of the city, also suggests it may have had a role in oversight and control, a place from which the city's daily rhythms could be monitored. So, the Temple of the Count serves as a vital counterpoint. It stands in the shadow of Pakal's monumental legacy, reminding us that a great Maya city was more than just its royal tombs. It was a network of power, residence, and administration that extended throughout the social order. The temple's story is a blend of two histories, the tangible, quiet archaeology of a Maya elite household, and the colorful, flawed, but ultimately important chapter written by an eccentric count whose imagination, for a time, shaped how the Western world saw a lost civilization. It represents both the reality of Palink's later years and the very beginning of its modern rediscovery, a bridge between the ancient Maya and the world that would eventually come to seek them out. Leaving the elegant plazas of Palink behind, our journey now takes us to a site where the experience of arrival is as memorable as the ruins themselves. To reach the city of Xanantunish in western Belize, you must first cross the Copán River not by a bridge, but on a remarkable relic of a bygone era, a hand-cranked ferry. This is a small, raft-like platform that you drive your vehicle onto, and then a local operator literally turns a large crank, pulling the ferry across the river on a cable. It's a wonderfully slow, deliberate process that forces you to leave the modern world behind, setting the stage for an encounter with the past. Once across, a gentle uphill climb through lush greenery leads you to one of the most visually striking structures in the entire Maya world, the pyramid known as El Castillo. Towering over the surrounding jungle canopy, El Castillo dominates the landscape. It rises 130 feet, making it the second tallest structure in Belize. The climb to its summit is a breathtaking endeavor, both physically and visually. As you ascend the steep, reconstructed stairway, the world opens up around you. The lush green canopy of the Belizean forest stretches out in every direction, and on a clear day, you can see all the way across the border into Guatemala. This panoramic view was no accident. Xanantunish, which means stone woman in the Yucatec Maya language, was a secondary center, a strategically placed citadel that controlled a critical stretch of the Copán River Valley. From this vantage point, its rulers could monitor and tax the flow of goods, jade, obsidian, cacao, and quetzal feathers moving along this vital trade route. Its position was a statement of both economic and military power. But the true crown jewel of El Castillo, the feature that makes it truly unique, is not the view from the top, but an incredible work of art about halfway up. Wrapping around the pyramid's eastern side is an enormous, intricately carved stucco frieze. Unlike the fragile, faded remnants found at other sites, this frieze is remarkably well preserved, allowing us to appreciate its complex narrative in stunning detail. It is a masterpiece of Maya cosmology rendered in plaster. The frieze is divided into panels, and at its center, you can make out a powerful, seated figure, likely a deified ancestor or a ruler portraying himself as a god. But the most captivating elements are the creatures that surround him. The frieze is populated by a menagerie of cosmic monsters and deities. You can clearly see the gaping jaws of the celestial serpent, its body undulating across the panel. There are figures that scholars identify as the sun god and the moon goddess, and most strikingly, a series of masks depicting the great mountain bird, a powerful symbol of the Maya holy mountain from which creation sprang. One of the most prominent figures is a fearsome being often called the jaguar god of the underworld, associated with the night sun and its journey through the world of the dead. This entire tableau wasn't just decorative, it was a massive public billboard proclaiming the ruler's intimate connection to the entire cosmic order. It showed his people that he was the linchpin holding the universe together, responsible for the rising of the sun, the changing of the seasons, and the very cycle of life and death. However, this grand display of power and cosmic authority may also tell a story of subjugation. The history of Untold is deeply intertwined with, and likely dominated by, a much larger and more aggressive city located just 20 miles away in modern-day Guatemala, Naranjo. In the late Classic period, Naranjo was ruled by a formidable and ruthless queen known as Lady Six Sky, who launched a series of military campaigns to bring surrounding cities under her control. A hieroglyphic stairway at Untold, though now mostly eroded, is believed by some epigraphers to record a significant event involving Naranjo. The prevailing theory is that it doesn't celebrate a local victory, but rather commemorates a conquest by Naranjo. It's possible that El Castillo and its magnificent frieze were built under the direct orders of Lady Six Sky's dynasty, as a way of imposing the religious and political iconography of the dominant city onto this strategically vital outpost. The glorious frieze, then, might not be a purely local expression of pride, but a symbol of forced allegiance, a beautiful yet constant reminder to the people of Untold of the powerful kingdom that held their fate in its hands. This adds a profound layer of complexity to the site, transforming it from a simple hilltop temple into a stone monument to the intricate and often brutal politics of the classic Maya world. Unlike the dramatic hilltop fortress of Untold, our next destination sits on low, open plains near the Pasión River in Guatemala, a location that made it a witness to the entire sweeping drama of Maya history. Cival, sometimes spelled Sable, is a site of profound chronological significance, a place where you can literally walk through layers of time that encompass both the dawn of Maya society and its twilight. Its story is not one of uninterrupted power, but of resilience, near extinction, and a final, bizarre rebirth under a strange new order, making it one of the most important windows we have into the complexities of the Maya collapse. The roots of Cival go back deep into the mists of the preclassic era. While other cities were just beginning, Cival was already establishing itself as a ceremonial center. Its earliest versions of the E-group astronomical complexes, similar to the one we saw at Cival, date back as far as 900 years before the Common Era. This makes Cival one of the very oldest continuously occupied Maya sites, a community that observed the equinox sun rise over its pyramids for well over 1,000 years. For centuries, it was a typical, albeit important, lowland Maya city, subject to the rise and fall of regional powers like the Great Tikal. But then, around the 9th century of the Common Era, something extraordinary happened. At a time when the entire Maya world was in a state of catastrophic decline, when cities were being abandoned wholesale, Cival experienced a sudden and unexpected renaissance. This revival, however, came with a very strange and foreign flavor. The city was resettled and dramatically revitalized by a group that archaeologists call the Puton Maya or Chontal Maya. These were not your typical lowland Maya. They were a seafaring and mercantile people from the Gulf Coast of Mexico, master traders who controlled the waterways. Think of them as the Vikings or the Phoenicians of the Mesoamerican world. When they arrived at a nearly deserted Cival around the year 830, they didn't just rebuild the old city, they reinvented it, imposing a new, hybrid culture that blended Maya traditions with distinctly foreign ideas. The architectural footprint of the city changed. They constructed a unique, circular ceremonial platform, a form that is almost unheard of in classic Maya architecture, but bears a striking resemblance to structures built by the Toltecs of central Mexico. This was not a simple case of cultural exchange. It has all the hallmarks of a military takeover, an invasion that paradoxically breathed new life into a dying city. The most compelling evidence for this cultural upheaval comes from the stone canvases left behind by this new regime, a series of exquisitely carved stelae. These tall, freestanding stone monuments are some of the finest artistic achievements of the entire terminal classic period, but they tell a confusing, fascinating story. The carving style is a world away from the rounded, deep relief figures of classic Maya art. This is a fine-line, intricate style, almost like an etcher's work on stone. The figures are flatter, more geometric, and they stand in stiff, formal poses that lack the dynamic movement of earlier Maya kings. But the content is what truly captivates scholars. Look closely at Stela 14, for example. The ruler holds a ceremonial bar, a classic symbol of Maya kingship, but his costume is utterly alien. He wears a nose plug shaped like a serpent's head, a feature associated with the war god of central Mexico. His sandals are closed-toed, a style foreign to the Maya. The hieroglyphs that frame him are pure Maya script, but they tell of events and name individuals with non-Maya titles. Another stela shows a scene that could be ripped from the pages of Toltec mythology, a warrior standing before a feathered serpent, a deity that would later become supremely important to the Aztecs as Quetzalcoatl. These stelae are not the work of a purely Maya court. They are the product of a blended society, a ruling class that adopted the local written language to legitimize its rule while proudly displaying its foreign military and religious symbols. This makes Cival's final chapter a profound puzzle. For about a century, this hybrid kingdom thrived while the world around it fell into silence. It became one of the last major cities still erecting dated monuments. The invaders, it seems, had a formula for stability that the old Maya kings had lost. Perhaps their control of long-distance trade routes brought in essential resources that buffered them from the droughts and famines crippling their neighbors. Maybe their more militaristic, impersonal style of rule was more effective at holding a society together during a time of crisis, but it was not enough. By the early 10th century, the dates on the stelae stop. The fine line carvings were left unfinished, and the city once again was swallowed by the jungle. Cival's story is a powerful testament to the fact that the Maya collapse was not a single, uniform event. It was a slow, complex unraveling where new forces could temporarily reverse the tide but could not ultimately withstand the powerful, mysterious currents that were pulling an entire civilization into history. It stands as a poignant reminder of cultural adaptation and finality, a place where the end was marked not by silence alone, but by a brief, brilliant, and very strange final act. While the towering pyramids and grand plazas represent the public face of Maya religion, some of their most profound spiritual encounters occurred not under the open sky, but deep within the earth itself. Our path now leads away from the sunlit cities to a place of perpetual twilight and echoing silence. the sacred cave of Naj-Tunish, located in the rugged karst landscape of eastern Guatemala. This is not a temple built by human hands, but a natural cathedral carved by water over millennia, a winding limestone cavern that the Maya believed was a direct portal to Xibalba, the terrifying and revered underworld. To enter Naj-Tunish was to embark on a literal journey into the realm of the dead, a place of both immense danger and potential spiritual power. The name Naj-Tunish itself translates to stone house, a simple name for an extraordinarily complex spiritual site. Reaching the cave's entrance requires a demanding trek through dense, mountainous jungle, a pilgrimage that would have physically and mentally prepared visitors for the transition into the sacred darkness. Inside, the atmosphere is instantly transformative. The air is cool and damp, the only sounds the steady drip of water and the occasional flutter of bats. Sunlight vanishes, replaced by the oppressive, profound blackness of the subterranean world. For the Maya, this darkness was not empty, it was alive with deities, ancestral spirits, and the lords of death. Caves were considered the literal mouths of the great earth monster, places where the boundaries between the human world and the supernatural realm were at their thinnest. Rituals performed here were among the most potent a Maya person could undertake. What makes Naj-Tunish utterly unique, and arguably one of the most important Maya archaeological sites in existence, is the sheer volume and intimacy of the art covering its walls. Unlike the formal, state-sanctioned carvings on stelae and temple friezes, the walls of Naj-Tunish are a canvas for personal devotion. Over several centuries, from the late preclassic through the classic period, pilgrims and priests ventured into the cavern's depths, and by the flickering light of torches, they left behind an incredible gallery of over 100 hieroglyphic texts and nearly 500 drawings. This isn't the art of kings boasting of conquests, this is graffiti of the soul. The images are often sketched in a fluid, spontaneous style using charcoal and red ochre. They depict ritual participants, deities, and animals, but the true treasure is the text. These glyphs form the longest known Maya cave inscription, and they reveal a stunning array of content, short poems that speak of beauty and longing, prophecies about future events, and detailed accounts of specific rituals involving bloodletting and visionary trances. One particularly moving inscription, found deep within a narrow passage, reads less like a formal record and more like a personal prayer. It describes a ritual performed by a nobleman, not a king, who drew blood from his own body as an offering to summon a vision. The text captures the moment of connection, the hope that the sacrifice would be accepted by the ancestors. This is a voice from the darkness, a direct line to the anxieties and aspirations of an individual Maya person over 1,000 years ago. We learn about their calendar, their understanding of astronomy, and their personal relationships with gods, all recorded not for public glorification, but for the eyes of the spirits alone. The cave walls became a sacred diary, a collective chronicle of humanity's attempt to commune with the unknown. Tragically, this priceless repository of intimate spirituality suffered a catastrophic blow in the late 20th century. After its modern rediscovery, the site was open to tourists, and in 1989, vandals defaced several of the most significant panels with spray paint. The damage was irreversible, and the Guatemalan government made the difficult but necessary decision to seal the cave permanently to protect what remains. Today, Naj-Tunish is closed to the public, its profound silence once again intact. Access is granted only to a handful of researchers under strict supervision. This act of preservation means that the cave has, in a way, returned to its ancient purpose, a place set apart, a sacred space accessible only to a dedicated few, its secrets once more guarded by the enduring darkness of Xibalba. It stands as a poignant reminder that the most fragile treasures of the past are often not the grand monuments, but the quiet, personal expressions of faith that were never meant for our eyes. If the rivalry between Tikal and Calakmul was the great geopolitical drama of the classic Maya world, then the very stones of Caracol tell the story of a brilliant and brutal surprise attack that changed the balance of power forever. Nestled in the foothills of the Maya Mountains in modern-day Belize, Caracol, meaning snail in Spanish, presents a deceptively peaceful appearance today. Its central core is spacious and green, lacking the immediately overwhelming pyramids of Tikal. But do not let this tranquility fool you. For much of the 6th and 7th centuries, Caracol was a military and political powerhouse, a key player in the epic struggle between the two superpowers, and the architect of one of the most decisive victories ever recorded in Maya history. The story of Caracol's rise is inextricably linked to its powerful patron, the Snake Kingdom of Calakmul. For decades, the great city of Tikal had exerted its influence over the region, likely dominating smaller centers like Caracol. But around the year 562, the political landscape shattered. A hieroglyphic text on a Caracol altar records a catastrophic event, the Star War or conquest of Tikal itself. The narrative reveals that this was not a solo mission. The king of Caracol, Lord Water, acted under the auspices of the king of Calakmul. Together, they launched a devastating attack on Tikal. The text chillingly describes the capture and likely sacrifice of Tikal's king, a man known as Double Bird. This was more than a simple battlefield victory. It was a profound humiliation and a termination of Tikal's ruling dynasty. The city entered a period often called its hiatus, a nearly 130-year silence during which it erected no dated monuments, its royal power broken. This victory catapulted Caracol into a golden age. Freed from Tikal's dominance and firmly embedded in Calakmul's alliance network, the city embarked on a period of explosive growth and monumental construction. Its population swelled, potentially reaching over 100,000 people, making it one of the largest cities in the entire Maya world. The centerpiece of this expansion is the massive pyramid known as Kana, which means Sky Palace. Even in its partially reclaimed state, Kana is a breathtaking sight. It remains the tallest human-made structure in Belize, rising 140 feet above the plaza in a series of 3 distinct tiers, each supporting palaces, temples, and administrative buildings. Climbing Kana is a journey through a vertical city. It wasn't just a temple, it was a royal acropolis, a functioning palace complex where the ruling dynasty lived, governed, and performed the rituals that sustained their kingdom. From its summit, the ruler of Caracol could look out over a vast, managed landscape of terraced fields and reservoirs, a testament to the city's sophisticated engineering. What truly sets Caracol apart and provides the clearest evidence of its scale is the revolutionary data gathered by laser mapping technology, or LiDAR. Flying over the dense canopy, LiDAR pulses penetrate the vegetation to map the ground surface below, revealing the ghostly footprint of the ancient city in astonishing detail. The results were staggering. The LiDAR maps showed that the cozy archaeological park we see today was merely the dense downtown core. Caracol extended for over 200 square kilometers, a sprawling, low-density urban metropolis interconnected by an extensive network of smooth, plastered causeways. These raised roads, some over 6 miles long, connected the city center to outlying districts, suburbs, and thousands of residential compounds. The imagery also revealed a highly modified and productive agricultural landscape. The hills around Caracol were sculpted into miles of terraces, designed to control erosion and maximize arable land. A complex system of reservoirs and canals captured and stored precious rainwater, allowing the city to thrive through seasonal dry spells. This intricate infrastructure points to a highly organized and centralized state, capable of managing land, labor, and water resources on an immense scale. The city was not just a ceremonial center, it was a carefully engineered ecosystem supporting a huge population. The wealth generated by this productive base is evident in the tombs excavated within Kana. While not as rich in jade as the burial of Pakal at Palenque, The tombs of Caracol's rulers contained exquisite offerings, including intricately carved shell ornaments, fine polychrome pottery, and unique artifacts like an altar carved from a single giant conch shell. These objects speak of a confident and prosperous court, deeply engaged in the trade and artistic currents of the classic period. Yet, the glory of Caracol was ultimately tied to the fate of its powerful ally. In the late 7th century, the pendulum of power began to swing back. Tikal, under a new, vigorous ruler, eventually broke free from its subjugation and began to reassert its authority. The final blow came in the year 696, when Tikal's king, Jasor Chan Kayawil, finally achieved his revenge. A hieroglyphic panel at Tikal records a major victory over Caracol, an event that seems to have broken the back of its power. While Caracol continued to exist for some time, it never regained its former political prominence. Its story is a powerful lesson in the volatile nature of Maya geopolitics, where a smaller, strategically savvy kingdom could, with the right alliance, topple a giant and carve out its own century of dominance, only to see its fortunes reverse just as dramatically when the winds of war changed direction. While the sprawling metropolis of Caracol was connected to the world by a web of causeways, our next destination took a very different approach to security. Imagine a city that looked inward, literally digging itself a moat and raising walls against the outside world. Deep in the Mexican state of Campeche, surrounded by dense, thorny jungle, lies the formidable city of Bican. Its name, derived from the Yucatec Maya word for ravine or path of the serpent, offers a powerful clue to its most defining feature. Bican is unique, a Maya site defined not by its tallest pyramid but by its earthworks. It is one of the very few Maya cities protected by a massive, dry defensive ditch and a corresponding rampart. This isn't a small trench, we're talking about a moat that stretches for over 1.5 miles encircling the city's core. In its original state, it was up to 50 feet wide and 16 feet deep, with the excavated earth piled high on the inner side to create a formidable palisade. This was not a ceremonial feature, this was serious, labor-intensive military architecture designed to keep people out. The very existence of such a fortification tells a dramatic story about the times in which Bican thrived. Construction on this massive earthwork began around the 2nd century of the Common Era, during the late Preclassic period. This was an era of significant social upheaval, when powerful cities were jockeying for control of trade routes and resources. The decision to invest such an enormous amount of communal labor into digging a ditch speaks volumes. The people of Bican felt a clear and present danger. They were not just worried about occasional raids, they were preparing for sustained, organized warfare. The rampart would have been topped with a wooden stockade, providing a high platform for defenders to repel attackers with spears and slingstones. The ditch itself would have been an intimidating obstacle, especially without siege technology. This fortress mentality suggests that the region around Bican was a contested frontier, a volatile borderland where political alliances were fragile and conflict was a constant threat. Yet within this protective ring of earth, life flourished, crossing the ancient causeways that served as the only gateways through the defenses. You enter the city's heart, a grand central plaza surrounded by an intricate acropolis. This was not a city that hid in fear. It was a confident, prosperous center that took its security seriously. The Acropolis is a fascinating architectural puzzle, a complex of temples, palaces, and courtyards that was built, modified, and expanded over more than a dozen generations. You can literally see the layers of history in its stones. Early structures were encased within later, grander additions. Corridors were blocked off, new stairways were built, and rooms were repurposed. This continuous renovation shows a dynamic, living city where each ruling dynasty sought to leave its mark, adapting the urban landscape to its changing needs and tastes. It was a seat of power for centuries, with rulers governing from these palaces even as the world outside the Great Ditch remained uncertain. beyond its defensive innovations, Bikan's architecture reveals another crucial aspect of its identity. It was a cosmopolitan crossroads. As you examine the decorative styles on the buildings, particularly the elaborate facade of Structure 8, you notice influences that are not purely local. There are clear artistic fingerprints from the great metropolis of Teotihuacan, far to the west in central Mexico. This is seen in specific architectural motifs, like the use of talud table row construction, a style with sloping walls topped by vertical panels, and certain artistic representations of the central Mexican rain god, Tlaloc. This doesn't mean Teotihuacan armies marched into Bikan. Instead, it points to Bikan's role as a critical hub in long-distance trade networks. It was likely a key stopover for merchants moving high-value goods like jade, obsidian, feathers, and cacao between the Maya heartlands and the powerful cultures of the Mexican highlands. This blend of influences makes Bikan a city of fascinating contradictions. It was a place open enough to the wider world to absorb foreign ideas and luxuries, yet closed off enough to feel the need to build one of the most significant defensive works in the ancient Maya world. It was both a node in a vast, interconnected economic system and a fortress preparing for isolation. The rulers of Bikan managed a delicate balance, fostering the cultural and commercial exchanges that brought wealth and prestige while simultaneously investing heavily in the defenses needed to protect that very wealth from the instability their trade networks likely helped create. The silent, grass-covered ramparts of Bikan stand as a powerful testament to a reality often overlooked in romantic visions of the Maya, that their world, for all its artistic and intellectual achievements, was also a world of real strategic fear and the constant looming shadow of war. Moving from the fortified stronghold of Bikan, we arrive at a city that represents the absolute zenith of Maya architectural elegance and scientific precision. A place where the very stones seem to whisper complex mathematical formulas. In the rolling Puc Hills of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, Uxmal stands as a masterpiece of late classic Maya civilization. Its buildings are renowned for their sheer visual harmony, featuring impossibly smooth walls, intricate geometric mosaics, and grand, graceful arches. But while the Pyramid of the Magician captures the eye with its unique oval shape, the true intellectual heart of Uxmal, and perhaps one of the most sophisticated structures in the entire ancient world, is the sprawling, majestic governor's palace. Stretching for an astonishing 300 feet along the top of a massive artificial platform, the palace is less a building and more a landscape in itself. Its facade is a symphony in limestone, a long, low, and breathtakingly intricate composition. The lower section is remarkably plain, a stark, smooth wall that emphasizes the building's horizontal power. Above this, the upper facade explodes into a complex latticework of stone. There are thousands of individually carved pieces forming a repeating pattern of intricate lattices, stylized serpents, and most notably, over 150 stone masks of the rain god, Choc, with his distinctive long, curling nose. This isn't random decoration. It's a symbolic representation of the cosmos, with the plain lower wall representing the earthly plane and the ornate upper section symbolizing the celestial realm populated by deities. The entire structure is a monumental declaration that the ruler who resided here existed at the intersection of these two worlds. This architectural genius, however, conceals an even deeper level of cosmic understanding. The true purpose of the governor's palace extends far beyond its walls, reaching out to the horizon in a display of astronomical alignment so precise it defies belief. If you were to stand in the central doorway of the palace and look out, your gaze would travel across the Grand Plaza, over a uniquely carved phallic stone stele, and continue for miles across the flat Yucatan landscape. This carefully engineered sightline was not designed to frame a beautiful sunset or a neighboring temple. It was built to capture a very specific and very rare celestial event, the southernmost extreme rising of the planet Venus. Venus held a place of profound importance in Maya cosmology. They tracked its cycles with an accuracy that would not be matched in Europe for centuries. They knew its 260-day appearance as the morning star and its 263-day period as the evening star, and they understood the cycles repeated every 584 days. But to the Maya, Venus was not a benevolent object. It was associated with the god Kukulkan or Quetzalcoatl and was viewed as a harbinger of war, conflict, and great change. Its movements were meticulously recorded because they were believed to influence the fate of kings and kingdoms. The ability to predict its path was tantamount to holding the key to prophecy itself. The alignment engineered at Uxmal is staggering in its accuracy. The sight line from the palace doorway over the stele points to the exact spot on the horizon where Venus would rise at its southernmost point in its 8-year cycle. This is not a rough alignment, it is precise to within a fraction of a degree. Achieving this required generations of meticulous observation and an advanced understanding of geometry and surveying. The architect had to account for the curvature of the Earth and the precise elevation of the platform to create this long-distance celestial marker. On that specific morning, once every 8 years, the ruler and his priests would have gathered in the pre-dawn darkness. As the sky began to lighten, Venus would appear exactly where the sightline predicted, a brilliant point of light perfectly framed by the architecture, seeming to emerge from the Earth itself in direct response to the ruler's gaze. This event was the ultimate performance of political and spiritual power. For the assembled populace, it would have been an awe-inspiring spectacle. It demonstrated in the most visceral way possible that the ruler was not just a political leader but a true intermediary with the cosmos. He didn't just pray to the gods, he had a direct line of sight to them. He could summon Venus on schedule, proving his control over the very cycles of time and destiny. This knowledge was his ultimate tool of statecraft, legitimizing his rule, justifying his wars, and ensuring the obedience of his people. The governor's palace, therefore, is far more than a royal residence. It is a permanent observatory, a cosmic clock, and a powerful piece of political propaganda carved in stone. It stands as a timeless testament to a civilization that saw no division between the laws of architecture and the laws of the universe, and whose rulers wielded that knowledge to command both the earth and the sky. The story of Dos Pilas reads less like a dry historical record and more like a Shakespearean tragedy of betrayal, ambition, and ruthless realpolitik, all meticulously carved into stone for eternity. Located in the Pitixbatun region of Guatemala, the city's very foundation was an act of calculated aggression. Around the year 645, a prince of the Great Tikal dynasty, a man named Bialaj-Chan Kayahuil, was sent to establish this new outpost. But this was no simple colonial expansion. It was a strategic masterstroke orchestrated by Tikal's arch-rival, the Snake Kingdom of Calakmul. Bialaj-Chan Kayahuil was essentially a puppet installed by a foreign power, a royal son turned against his own family and city in a devastating civil war. Dos Pilas, meaning two pools, was built on a defensible limestone escarpment, a natural fortress that reflected its intended purpose from the very beginning, to be a dagger pointed at the heart of Tikal. The city's entire history is laid bare on its hieroglyphic stairway, a monumental public record that is one of the most revealing political narratives ever discovered in the Maya world. Unlike the cosmic allegories of other sites, these glyphs are brutally specific. They chronicle in unflinching detail the events of the Star War that Bialaj-Chan Kayahuil and his Calakmul overlords waged against his own brother, the King of Tikal. The text describes battles, the capture of high-ranking nobles, and the eventual victory of the Dos Pilas faction. It is a stunning piece of propaganda, a justification for fratricide and political treason, commissioned by the victors to legitimize their usurper dynasty. The stairway forces every visitor to walk upon this story of conquest, a constant reminder that the city's power was born from a foundational act of betrayal. This theme of relentless conflict is etched into the very urban plan of Dos Pilas. The city center is compact and heavily fortified, with buildings crowded onto the high ground of the escarpment. Steep, defensive walls were constructed not as an afterthought but as an integral part of the design. Plazas are small and enclosed, feeling more like fortified courtyards than open public spaces. Every aspect of the layout speaks to a community living under a perpetual state of siege, a garrison city whose existence was defined by the threat of attack, most likely from the very kin they had betrayed. The rulers here lived in a bubble of paranoia, their power maintained only through the continued support of their distant patrons in Calakmul. The drama intensifies with the next ruler, Uxmal, the son of the founder. His reign is marked on stelae that show him in classic, powerful poses, but the political winds were shifting. The most fascinating figure from this era, however, is a woman, Lady of Cancain. A princess from a distant city, her marriage to the Dos Pilas king was a strategic alliance, a common practice to secure loyalties, but the story takes a dark turn. After her husband's death, she seems to have wielded significant influence, perhaps as a regent for a young heir. The glyphs suggest that she eventually fled Dos Pilas, returning to her homeland. This was not a simple journey. In the volatile world of Maya politics, such a move likely signaled a catastrophic breakdown in the alliance, leaving Dos Pilas increasingly isolated as the power of its patron, Calakmul, began to wane. The final chapter of Dos Pilas is as sudden and violent as its beginning. In the late 8th century, the city's fortunes collapsed entirely. The end was not a slow decline, but a deliberate, systematic annihilation. Invaders, who were likely former rivals or perhaps even a resurgent Tikal faction, swept into the city. They did not just conquer it, they sought to erase its very memory from the world. The monuments that had proudly proclaimed the dynasty's history for over a century were systematically attacked. The stone stelae depicting the rulers were violently defaced. The noses and mouths of the carved figures were smashed off, a ritual act meant to symbolically kill the individual, preventing them from breathing or speaking in the afterlife. The hieroglyphic stairway itself was targeted, with key blocks pried loose and scattered. This was a termination ritual, a purposeful damnatio memoriae intended to extinguish the political and spiritual power of the Dos Pilas royal line forever. The fate of Dos Pilas is a poignant microcosm of the wider classic Maya collapse. Its rise was fueled by the great power struggle between Tikal and Calakmul, and its fall mirrored the disintegration of that entire political system. When the network of alliances that supported these secondary kingdoms frayed and broke, they were left vulnerable. The meticulous destruction of its monuments provides some of the most visceral archaeological evidence for the rage and finality of that collapse. It shows us that the end was not a peaceful fading away. It was a violent unraveling where the intricate web of loyalty and betrayal that had sustained the classic Maya world for centuries suddenly snapped, leaving behind shattered stones and a silence that speaks volumes about the price of ambition. While the rulers of Dos Pilas carved their violent history into stone, the lords of another city chose a different, far more colorful medium to tell their story, one that would remain hidden in a remote jungle chamber for over 1,000 years. Our journey takes us now to the Lacandan jungle of Chiapas, Mexico, to the site of Bonampak. The name means painted walls in Yucatec Maya, and it is a promise the site keeps in the most spectacular fashion imaginable. Bonampak itself is a modest ceremonial center, a secondary city that was likely a vassal to the powerful Uxmal, located just 20 miles away. If you were to walk through its quiet plazas, you might not guess its global significance. But tucked away on a small hillside is Structure 1, the Temple of the Murals, a single, unassuming building that contains arguably the most important pictorial record of the ancient Maya world. Stepping through the narrow doorway of the temple is like stepping through a time portal. The interior is divided into 3 small, windowless rooms, and every square inch of their walls and vaulted ceilings is covered in a breathtaking narrative painted in vivid fresco. The Maya artists used a palette derived from minerals and plants, deep Maya blue from indigo and clay, rich reds from hematite, bright yellows from ochre, and greens from malachite. What is absolutely staggering is that these are not disconnected scenes or generic religious imagery. They depict a single, continuous historical event that unfolded over several days, a meticulously recorded saga of royal succession, warfare, and brutal victory commissioned by a king named Chan Muwan II around the year 790. This is not a myth, it is a political documentary in paint. The story begins in Room 1, a scene of opulent courtly preparation. Here we are introduced to the royal family. The future heir, a young boy, is presented to the noble court. The atmosphere is formal and ceremonial. We see musicians playing long trumpets and shaking rattles, while attendants in elaborate feathered headdresses look on. High-ranking lords and ladies, their bodies adorned with jade and fine textiles, engage in conversation. The level of detail is astonishing. You can see the intricate patterns on their clothing, the different styles of their hairstyles denoting their rank, and the serene yet authoritative expressions on their faces. This room shatters any old misconception of the Maya as a simple, peaceful society of star-gazing priests. This is the portrait of a sophisticated, hierarchical aristocracy, a court with complex social rituals and a clear line of succession. It shows a world of immense wealth and cultural refinement, setting the stage for the dramatic events to come. That drama explodes into view in Room 2. The serene ceremony of the first room is replaced by the chaotic, terrifying spectacle of war. The entire wall is a panoramic battle scene of breathtaking ferocity. Warriors, their bodies painted black for battle and wearing jaguar skin armor, clash in a dense, tangled forest. There is no romantic glory here. The painting captures the raw, visceral horror of combat. A warrior grabs an enemy by the hair, preparing to deliver a death blow with a stone axe. Another lies defeated on the ground, his lifeblood pooling around him. Captives stripped of their finery are dragged roughly by their hair towards their fate. The artists did not shy away from the gruesome details. We see wounds, gushing blood, and the agonized expressions of the defeated. This is not a vague allegory. It is a specific, recorded military victory, intended to glorify the king and demonstrate his power to subdue his enemies. The grim conclusion of this story unfolds in Room 3. The battle is over, and the victory must be celebrated and sanctified. The scene shifts to a grand, triumphant ceremony on a temple staircase. The victorious king, Chan Muwan, and his queen stand resplendent in their finest regalia, overseeing the proceedings. But the focus of the celebration is the torture of the captured nobles. The prisoners, now naked and humiliated, are subjected to a ritual bloodletting. One captive lies at the bottom of the stairs, presumably already dead. Another has his fingers bloodied, a prelude to his eventual sacrifice. The most chilling detail is the figure of a ruler, possibly from a rival city, who is shown having his fingernails torn out while other captives look on in terror. Above this scene of human suffering, nobles in fantastic feathered costumes perform an elaborate dance, their movements a stark contrast to the agony below. The message is unmistakable. The power of the king is affirmed through the brutal subjugation of his foes, and this violence is an essential, sanctioned part of the cosmic order. The discovery of these murals in 1946 by American photographers Giles Healy and Carl Frey revolutionized Maya studies. Before Bonampak, many scholars held a more idealized view of the Maya, emphasizing their intellectual achievements in astronomy and mathematics while downplaying the role of large-scale warfare. These paintings forced a complete reassessment. They provided undeniable, vivid proof that Maya society was highly militaristic, that warfare was central to political power and that ritual violence, including the torture of high-status captives, was a public spectacle crucial for legitimizing a ruler's authority. The Temple of the Murals gives us more than just facts. It gives us atmosphere and emotion. It allows us to hear the imagined blare of war trumpets, to feel the tension in the royal court, and to witness the stark reality of a world where beauty and brutality were inextricably linked, forever preserved on the walls of a forgotten jungle temple. From the inland political dramas of Dos Pilas and the vivid battle scenes of Bonampak, our journey now takes us to the very edge of the Maya world, to a place where the turquoise waters of the Caribbean meet sheer white cliffs. The city of Cholum presents a completely different face of Maya civilization. Unlike the massive, millennia-old pyramids buried deep in the rainforest, Cholum is a compact, walled city from the late post-classic period, a time when the great classic era metropolises had long since fallen into silence. Its construction dates to between the 12th and 15th centuries, making it one of the last major cities built and occupied by the Maya, a vibrant hub that was still thriving when Spanish ships first appeared on the horizon. Arriving at Cholum feels like stepping into a postcard, but this breathtaking beauty was the setting for a sophisticated and pragmatic coastal economy. The first thing you notice about Cholum is its defining feature, a massive defensive wall that seals off the city on 3 sides, with the 4th side protected by the precipitous sea cliffs. This wall, up to 20 feet thick in places and standing 15 feet high, immediately signals a shift in priorities. While earlier classic cities like Tikal were open and confident in their regional dominance, Cholum's inhabitants were clearly concerned with external threats. This was an era of increased conflict and shifting power dynamics, possibly from rival Maya groups or other seafaring peoples from around the Gulf of Mexico. Life here was focused inward and defended, yet within these walls, Cholum was not a city hiding in fear. It was a bustling, strategic port that controlled a critical node in a vast maritime trade network. Cholum's primary reason for existence was its location. It sat at the heart of a coastal trading route that circumnavigated the Yucatan Peninsula. Large seagoing canoes capable of carrying tons of goods and dozens of paddlers would have pulled up on the beach below the cliffs or at the city's small cove. This made Cholum a central marketplace where goods from across Mesoamerica were exchanged. From the highlands of Guatemala came precious obsidian, the razor-sharp volcanic glass essential for tools and weapons. From other regions came jade for ritual objects, colorful quetzal feathers for royal headdresses, and cocoa beans, which were used as currency. But Cholum also produced and exported its own valuable commodities. The northern Yucatan is arid, and the evaporation ponds along the coast produced vast quantities of salt, a vital preservative that was in high demand. There is also evidence that Cholum was a key source of turquoise, a stone highly prized by cultures as far away as central Mexico. The architectural heart of Cholum is the structure known as El Castillo, a sturdy temple perched dramatically on the edge of the cliff, serving as both a religious site and a lighthouse. But for a deeper understanding of the city's spiritual life, we must turn to the Temple of the Frescoes. This small, 2-story building is a gem of post-classic Maya art and cosmology. Its lower gallery features a series of stucco reliefs and, most importantly, fragments of interior murals that have survived the humid salt air. These paintings depict a pantheon of Maya deities, but one figure stands out as particularly important to Cholum, the so-called descending god. This deity is shown upside down, with its feet pointed toward the sky and its head toward the earth, as if diving or falling from the heavens. He is often depicted with wings and a tail, resembling a bee or a diving insect. His meaning is complex and layered. Most directly, he is associated with the setting sun, which each day appears to plunge into the western sea. For a city oriented toward the ocean, this daily celestial event would have held profound significance. But the bee imagery is equally telling. The Yucatan Peninsula is home to the stingless bee, and honey was a major export product used for food, fermenting the ceremonial drink balché, and for medicinal purposes. The descending god, therefore, likely represents a fusion of celestial and earthly concerns, a deity of the setting sun who also presided over the vital honey production that supported the local economy. The prominence of this god at Cholum and the overall style of its art signals a significant evolution in Maya religion. The elaborate, long-text hieroglyphic narratives of kings like those at Yaxchilan are gone. Instead, we see a shift toward more simplified, almost mass-produced religious iconography focused on a smaller set of deities with direct practical associations like rain, sun, and bees. This reflects a broader societal change. The powerful, god-like kings of the classic period had vanished. Cholum was likely governed by a council of merchants and priests, a pragmatic administration more focused on commerce and survival than on erecting monuments to individual glory. The city represents the final, resilient chapter of an independent Maya civilization, an adaptable, mercantile society that found a way to endure for centuries after the collapse of the old inland kingdoms, until the arrival of a new world from across the sea would ultimately change everything. Leaving the coastal walls of Cholum behind, we now venture to a city celebrated as the Paris of the Maya world, a place where stone was transformed into poetry. In the lush, river-carved valley of western Honduras, the city of Copán stands apart. While other Maya centers impressed with sheer scale or formidable defenses, Copán was renowned as an unparalleled center of art and learning. Its sculptors were the finest of their age, creating stelae so deeply and masterfully carved that the figures seemed to breathe, stepping out from their stone canvases. Yet the single greatest achievement at Copán, a monument of staggering historical ambition, is the structure known as the hieroglyphic stairway. This is not merely a staircase, it is the longest single pre-Columbian text ever discovered, a massive stone book containing over 2,000 individual glyphs, each one a syllable or a word in the complex story of a kingdom. The visual impact of the stairway is overwhelming even today. It ascends the heart of the city's main acropolis, a central artery climbing 63 feet high, comprising over 70 steps. Originally, every single one of these steps was carved on its riser with hieroglyphs, creating a continuous narrative flow from the base to the summit. Flanking the sides of the staircase are 10 large, sculpted figures believed to represent past kings and powerful nobles, as if this royal council is watching over the ascent and bearing witness to the history inscribed before them. The entire structure was once painted in vivid reds, blues, and yellows, a brilliant polychrome spectacle that would have dominated the central plaza. It was designed to be the ultimate public record, a permanent and unmissable declaration of the dynasty's glorious and unbroken lineage, a story meant to be seen and understood by all. But when modern archaeologists first encountered the stairway, it presented a heart-breaking puzzle. Centuries of exposure to the elements, seismic activity, and the relentless growth of tree roots had caused the entire structure to collapse into a gigantic, chaotic heap of carved stones. It was as if a library containing the only copy of a civilization's history had been thrown down a mountainside. The individual blocks, each weighing hundreds of pounds, were jumbled completely out of order. The task of reconstruction became one of the greatest challenges in the history of Maya archaeology. It was a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle of monumental proportions, where the pieces were not just shaped differently, but were covered in a written language that was only partially understood at the time. The painstaking work of reassembly fell to dedicated teams of epigraphers and archaeologists over many decades. Their process was a mixture of brute force logistics and delicate forensic analysis. First, each block was carefully catalogued, photographed, and a plaster cast was made of its glyphs. Then, like detectives piecing together a story from scattered clues, scholars began the slow work of matching the glyphs. They looked for continuations of grammatical patterns, for recurring names of kings and gods, and for visual cues in the carving style. It was an intellectual marathon that spanned generations. A major breakthrough came when scholars realized that the builders of the stairway had actually left a clue for future restorers. Some of the blocks were marked with mason's marks, small glyphic annotations that seemed to indicate their intended position, almost like the assembly instructions for a piece of flat-pack furniture from the ancient world. Even with these clues, the work is still considered incomplete, a testament to the immense complexity of the original vision. The story the stairway tells, once pieced together, is a rich and complex chronicle of Copán's royal dynasty, stretching back through 16 generations to its mythical founder, Kainish Yaxkayuk Mo, or Great Sun First Quetzalmacor, who arrived in the year 426. It details the lives, conquests, and rituals of his successors. However, the man who commissioned this monumental history was the 16th and final ruler in that long line, a king named Yax Passage Chan Yopot, who ascended the throne in the year 763. He inherited a kingdom that was already showing signs of severe strain. Decades earlier, Copán had suffered a catastrophic military defeat at the hands of its former vassal, the city of Quirigá, which resulted in the capture and sacrifice of its 13th king. This event shattered Copán's regional authority and crippled its economy. By the time Yax Passage took power, the city was grappling with overpopulation, environmental degradation from centuries of intensive farming, and a restless, increasingly powerful noble class that was challenging the king's absolute authority. In this context of looming crisis, the hieroglyphic stairway was not just a celebration of history. It was a desperate piece of political theater, a last grand effort at legitimization. Yax Passage Chan Yopot was essentially using the past to save the present. By inscribing the entire glorious history of his dynasty onto the most prominent structure in the city, he was making a powerful argument for the necessity of continued royal rule. The message was clear: look at the unbroken line of great kings from whom I descend. My authority is sanctioned by history and the gods. It was an attempt to shore up his weakening power by reminding his subordinates of the weight of tradition standing behind him. He even included the figures of powerful nobles on the stairway, a likely concession to their growing influence, a way of co-opting them into his narrative in the hope of securing their loyalty. Ultimately, however, the stone memory of the stairway could not hold back the tides of change. The grand history it proclaimed was in fact coming to an end. After the reign of Yax Passage Chan Yopot, the historical record at Copán falls silent. No more dated monuments were erected. The royal palace was abandoned. Within a few generations, the city's core was deserted. The hieroglyphic stairway, therefore, stands as a profoundly poignant monument. It is both a magnificent celebration of a civilization's intellectual and artistic achievement and a stark memorial to its collapse. It represents the human impulse to create something permanent in the face of impermanence, to shout a story of glory into a gathering storm of silence. It is the longest story the Maya ever told in stone, a story whose final, unwritten chapter was the quiet fading of the very dynasty that sought to make itself eternal. Yet, for all the grand political statements carved into the stone stairways of Copán, some of the most profound revelations about the Maya have come not from towering pyramids, but from a place of almost humble proportions. Deep in the remote, dry forests of northeastern Guatemala, a small, unimpressive mound known as the Pinchera's Pyramid at the site of San Bartolo was hiding a secret that would fundamentally rewrite our understanding of Maya civilization. The discovery, made in 2001 by archaeologist William Saturno, was the result of sheer luck and perseverance. While seeking shade from the blistering sun in a looter's trench, Saturno shone his flashlight onto the trench wall and saw a fleeting glimpse of painted stucco. What began as a cautious excavation soon revealed one of the most significant archaeological finds of the new millennium, a room sealed for over 2,000 years, its walls covered in murals of breathtaking beauty and sophistication, dating to around 100 years before the Common Era. To step into that chamber is to travel back to the very foundations of Maya kingship. The murals, executed in a vibrant palette of black, red, yellow, and ochre, are not mere decorations. They are a theological and political manifesto painted with a master's hand. One wall presents a stunningly complete narrative of the Maya creation myth. Centuries before these stories were recorded in the post-classic text known as the Popol Vuh. We see the hero twins, Hunahpu and Xbalanque, in the underworld, preparing for their ball game against the Lords of Death. We witness the maize god, the central figure of creation, being resurrected and reborn, a powerful metaphor for the cycle of life, death, and regeneration that was central to the Maya worldview. The artistic quality is extraordinary, with fluid lines and a compositional complexity that rivals anything produced during the later classic period. But perhaps the most revolutionary panel depicts a scene that scholars never expected to find in such an early context: the coronation of a king. A royal figure, seated on a throne, is being invested with the symbols of power by a series of guards and attendants. This single image shattered a long-held assumption. It proved that the core ideology of divine kingship, the belief that rulers were direct intermediaries with the gods, whose rituals ensured the world's continued existence, was not an innovation of the classic period around 250 AD. It was already a fully developed, sophisticated political system 400 years earlier. The king at San Bartolo was not a primitive chief. He was the inheritor of a long and elaborate tradition, his right to rule divinely sanctioned and artistically proclaimed on a grand scale. The implications of this are staggering. It means that the Maya cultural florescence, what we think of as their golden age, had much deeper roots. The sudden appearance of great cities like Tikal and Calakmul in the 3rd century was not a sudden explosion of genius, but the culmination of centuries of earlier development in the preclassic period. San Bartolo forces us to reimagine the preclassic Maya world not as a simple, formative era of village farmers, but as a time of vibrant, complex states with established royal courts, professional artists, and a fully formed religious philosophy. The murals also contain some of the earliest examples of Maya writing yet discovered. While the glyphs are still being deciphered, their presence alongside such elaborate imagery confirms that a developed writing system, capable of recording complex ideas and histories, was in use far earlier than previously believed. The preservation of these murals is itself a miracle. The room was intentionally sealed by the Maya themselves, likely as part of a ritual entombment when they built a larger pyramid directly over the old structure. This act of encapsulation protected the paintings from moisture, light, and air for 2 millennia, preserving their vivid colors with a clarity that is almost unheard of in the humid tropics. Today, accessing the murals requires archaeologists to navigate a narrow, claustrophobic tunnel, a journey that underscores the sacred and secret nature of the space. San Bartolo does not boast the monumental scale of El Mirador or the dramatic setting of Chulam. Its power lies in its quiet testimony, a perfectly preserved window into a lost world of early splendor. It stands as a powerful reminder that the jungle still guards secrets capable of overturning our most firmly held beliefs, proving that the story of the Maya is far older and far more rich than we ever dreamed. But the quest to understand the origins of Maya kingship doesn't always lead to the grandest cities. Sometimes the most profound secrets are guarded by the most unlikely sentinels. Just 12 miles southwest of the towering pyramids of Tikal, in a region of dense, low-lying jungle, lies the site of El Zotz. The name translates to the Bat, a fitting title for a city that existed in the perpetual shadow of its colossal neighbor. For the rulers of El Zotz, life would have been a constant, precarious balancing act, a struggle to assert their own independence while living under the looming threat of the superpower next door. It was here, atop a steep ridge known as the Diablo Pyramid, that archaeologists made a discovery that would illuminate the darkest, most sacred corners of early Maya rule. An untouched royal tomb, a time capsule from the very dawn of the classic period. The story of the discovery reads like a modern-day archaeological thriller. After years of mapping and excavating the main Acropolis, the team, led by Stephen Houston of Brown University, turned their attention to this smaller, isolated pyramid. As they dug into the summit, they uncovered a series of increasingly tantalizing clues. They found the skeletons of several sacrificed children, offerings meant to protect and accompany what lay deeper within. Then they hit a solid wall of masonry. Breaking through it, they found a small, dark chamber, and inside, something that defied all expectations. It wasn't a skeleton laid out neatly on a stone slab. Instead, they found a large, bulbous, and heavily decorated bundle. This was a funeral bundle, the remains of a king carefully wrapped in textiles and other perishable materials, which had long since decayed, leaving behind a mysterious, lumpen form encased in a wealth of durable offerings. The tomb had been sealed around the year 350 of the Common Era, and miraculously, it had remained completely intact, untouched by looters for over 16 centuries. As conservators began the painstaking process of excavating the bundle, the true magnitude of the find became clear. This was the burial of an early founder king, a man who may have established the dynasty that would rule El Zotz for generations. The riches surrounding him were staggering. His body was adorned with priceless ornaments. He wore a belt made of shell and jade beads that jingled like coins, each bead a small fortune. His wrists were covered in bracelets of spondylus shell, a vibrant orange spiny oyster imported from distant coasts. But the most astonishing finds were the organic materials that had somehow survived in the tomb's unique microclimate. They discovered rare and fragile artifacts almost never found in the Maya world, including intricately carved wooden staffs, textiles with faint traces of vibrant paint, and perhaps most incredibly, the remnants of Maya books. These were not books as we know them today, but codices made from amate, the inner bark of the fig tree, which was pounded into a flexible, paper-like sheet. These sheets were then coated with a thin layer of white stucco and folded like an accordion to create a book. While the organic pages had mostly decayed, the stucco coating from several codices had survived, preserved in delicate, flake-like fragments. On these flakes, conservators could make out faint traces of painted glyphs and intricate illustrations. These books were not mere decorations. They were sacred repositories of knowledge, likely containing astronomical tables, ritual calendars, and mythological histories. Their presence in the tomb was a profound statement. This king was not just a warrior, he was a sage, a keeper of esoteric knowledge that was essential for ruling in accordance with the god's will. He was buried with the very tools he needed to continue his royal and priestly duties in the afterlife. The tomb also speaks to the brutal realities of Maya royal power. The king did not journey to the underworld alone. The chamber was accompanied by the remains of 6 sacrificed individuals, likely war captives or servants chosen to serve him in the next life. Outside the tomb, the sacrificial offerings were even more elaborate. The archaeologists found the bones of several children and a mature male, all interred as part of the foundational rituals that consecrated the pyramid as a sacred mountain. This practice underscores the Maya belief that the construction of a temple and the burial of a king within it was a cosmic event that required the ultimate offering of human life to sustain the cosmic order. The king's divine power was literally built upon a foundation of blood. The discovery at the Diablo Pyramid provides an unparalleled snapshot of a critical moment in Maya history. This was the formative era when the institution of divine kingship was being codified across the lowlands. The tomb shows us that from the very beginning, these rulers were buried with an incredible concentration of wealth and symbolic power. The elaborate funeral bundle, the sacrificed attendants, the sacred codices, and the rich jade offerings all point to a society that had already developed a highly stratified social structure and a complex royal ideology. The king of El-Zotz, though ruling a city dwarfed by Tikal, possessed all the trappings of a divine lord. His burial tells us that the seeds of classic Maya civilization, with its god-kings, its monumental architecture, and its elaborate funerary practices were already fully sown, even in the shadow of giants, waiting for the right conditions to burst into the full, brilliant, and often terrifying flower that would define an era. Leaving the shadowy tomb of El-Zotz, we now journey to a city that chose to proclaim its power not in hidden chambers, but in the brilliant, open light of the sun. In the dense, tropical forests of southern Quintana Roo, Mexico, lies Coatzacoalcos, a city whose name is a modern corruption of the English Cohune Ridge, for the palm trees found there. While Coatzacoalcos boasts many plazas and palaces, its heart and soul is an architectural gem known as the Temple of the Masks. This structure is a breathtaking example of how the Maya blended art, religion, and politics into a single, powerful statement, one that has survived the centuries with a haunting, expressive presence. The temple itself is an early classic structure built around the year 500 of the Common Era. It is designed as a radial pyramid, meaning its central stairway faces almost due west, a deliberate orientation that becomes profoundly significant during the equinoxes. But the moment you lay eyes on the broad, central staircase, you understand what makes this place unique. Flanking the steps are 5 enormous, towering stucco masks, each one a monumental portrait of the Maya sun god, Kinish-Ahau. These are not small decorations, they are colossal faces, each standing over 6 feet tall, built from stone and then covered in a thick layer of painted stucco. They peer out from the pyramid's facade with an unwavering gaze, their features frozen in an expression of serene, yet overwhelming power. What immediately captures your attention are the specific, stylized features that the Maya considered the height of beauty and divine status. Each mask has a distinctly crossed eye, a feature achieved through intentional childhood modification or artistic convention to signify a person of high rank and spiritual insight. The filed teeth, often inlaid with precious jade, are another clear marker of elite status. The mouths are broad with a slight, almost knowing smile, and the entire face is framed by elaborate, symbolic headdresses featuring motifs of vegetation and life. Originally, these masks would have been painted in vibrant shades of red, black, and yellow, making them gleam like fiery apparitions in the sunlight. They were not meant to be hidden or subtle. They were a public spectacle of divine connection, designed to awe any visitor approaching the temple. The temple's alignment is the key to unlocking its primary function. This was a stage for solar worship, an architectural machine designed to interact with the sun on the most important days of the year. On the spring and autumn equinoxes, the sun sets directly behind the temple. As it descends, its rays would have bathed the masks in a final, intense golden light, making them appear as if they were glowing from within, actively absorbing the sun's power before the world fell into darkness. This dramatic transformation was surely the climax of a major ceremonial event. Priests and rulers would have performed rituals on the staircase, their bodies silhouetted against the setting sun, directly between the people gathered below and the illuminated faces of the gods. It was a piece of celestial theater that demonstrated the ruler's role as the essential intermediary who could harness the sun's energy for the benefit of the community. This leads directly to the temple's ultimate purpose, political legitimization. The ruler of Coatzacoalcos was not just building a shrine, he was building a resume carved in stucco. By saturating his most prominent temple with the image of Kinish-Ahau, he was making an unequivocal claim. He was asserting that his right to rule came directly from the sun god himself. In a world dependent on agriculture, the sun was the ultimate source of life. Its daily journey across the sky dictated the growing seasons and, by extension, the survival of the entire population. By positioning himself as the sun god's primary representative on Earth, the ruler was effectively saying that the city's prosperity, its abundant harvests, and its very continuity were dependent on his continued favor with this most vital deity. The Temple of the Masks was therefore far more than a place of worship. It was the foundational propaganda of a local dynasty, a permanent, undeniable stone and stucco argument for why this particular family deserved to hold power. It connected their authority to the most fundamental and observable force in the universe, creating a bond between the cosmic and the political that would have been almost impossible for their subjects to challenge. While the lords of Kohenlik aligned their city with the sun, the rulers of our next destination were preoccupied with a far more immediate and earthly concern: survival. If the story of Dos Pilas was a political tragedy, then the fate of its sister city, Aguetka, is the gripping, violent final act. Perched on a narrow limestone peninsula in Guatemala's Pitixpatan region, Aguetka is a natural fortress. Sheer cliffs, some dropping over 300 feet, defended on three sides with a massive man-made defensive ditch cutting off the only land approach. This wasn't just a city with walls, it was a citadel designed from the ground up to withstand a siege, the heavily fortified capital of the same Dos Pilas dynasty that rose to power through betrayal. Walking into Aguetka feels different. The main entrance forces you through a narrow, easily defended causeway, a gauntlet that any attacker would have had to run. The entire urban plan is linear, stretched along the spine of the peninsula, with buildings crowded together and plazas that feel more like fortified courtyards. This was a community living under a state of perpetual alert, a clear indication that the political chaos unleashed by the Dos Pilas dynasty had created a world of relentless existential threats. The incredible value of Aguetka to archaeologists lies not in its grand scale, but in its startlingly abrupt end. Around the year 810, this seemingly impregnable fortress was violently overrun. The attack was so sudden and devastating that the inhabitants had no time to gather their belongings or flee in an organized manner. They simply ran for their lives, leaving the city frozen in a moment of panic. This has given Aguetka a reputation as the Pompeii of the Maya, a place where time stopped, preserving an unparalleled snapshot of terminal classic daily life. Unlike most Maya sites, where valuable objects were looted in antiquity or decayed over centuries, the ruins of Aguetka contain a treasure trove of ordinary, fragile items exactly where they were last used. As archaeologists excavated the elite residential area, they found workshops and palaces that looked as if their occupants had just stepped away. In one room, they discovered a scribe's toolkit, paint pots with dried pigment still inside, finely carved shell ornaments in various stages of completion, and unused obsidian blades laid out for future work. In another building, believed to be the palace of the last ruler, they found precious jade jewels and ceremonial scepters simply left on the floor. Most poignantly, in the city's main ceremonial center, they uncovered the grisly evidence of the final conflagration. The principal temples and the royal palace were not just abandoned, they were systematically burned. The intense heat of the fires cracked the limestone walls and carbonized wooden beams, leaving behind thick layers of ash and charcoal. The attackers didn't just want to conquer Aguetka, they sought to annihilate it ritually, to symbolically extinguish the power of its ruling dynasty by turning its heart to ashes. This deliberate destruction points to a level of warfare that went far beyond simple raiding. The termination of a city's sacred core was a profound act in Maya cosmology, meant to kill its spiritual vitality forever. The evidence suggests the attackers knew exactly which buildings held the most significance. The targeting of the royal palace and temples indicates this was a calculated strike against the city's leadership and its divine mandate to rule. The fact that Aguetka, with all its formidable defenses, still fell so completely reveals the sheer ferocity and scale of the conflict engulfing the region. The Dos Pilas dynasty, which had built its power on warfare, was ultimately consumed by it. The very defenses that had protected them for generations became a trap, as the inhabitants had nowhere to run when the perimeter was finally breached. The story of Aguaitca provides one of the clearest and most human links we have to the realities of the Maya collapse. It moves the discussion from abstract theories about drought and ecological stress to a tangible, visceral event. We are not looking at a slow decline where a population gradually dwindles away. We are witnessing a sudden, catastrophic rupture. The half-finished crafts and abandoned personal treasures speak of interrupted lives and shattered futures. They tell us that the collapse was experienced by individuals: the scribe who never finished his necklace, the royal family who fled without their heirlooms. This single event at Aguaitca serves as a powerful microcosm for the wider unraveling. It demonstrates that the political system of competing, warring city-states which had defined the classic period had finally reached a point of unsustainable violence. The elaborate networks of alliance and betrayal that once maintained a balance of power had snapped, leading to a firestorm that even the most heavily fortified cities could not survive. Aguaitca stands as a stark, sobering monument to the fact that sometimes the greatest threats to a civilization come not from the environment but from within. If the fortified citadel of Aguaitca represents a desperate struggle for survival on the Earth's surface, then the rituals performed at our next destination required a complete surrender to the powers below. Journey with us now to the secluded jungle of central Belize, to a place called Cara Blanca, which translates to white face. This is not a city in any conventional sense. There are no grand plazas or towering pyramids. Instead, the landscape is punctuated by a series of deep, mysterious waterholes or cenotes that plunge into the limestone bedrock. These are not inviting, sun-drenched swimming holes. The water of Cara Blanca is dark, cool, and profoundly still, surrounded by sheer cliffs. For the ancient Maya, these pools were not sources of fresh water. They were something far more powerful and terrifying. They were viewed as Tizianot, meaning sacred well, and more significantly as all portals to the underworld, Xibalba. The temples built here were not designed to reach for the heavens, but to facilitate a controlled descent into the realm of the gods of death and creation. Scattered along the edges of these cenotes are small, elegant structures, the most significant of which is known as Temple 19. Unlike the monumental acropolises of Tikal or Caracol, this temple is intimate, a single-room building perched precariously on the rim of a 60-foot-deep pool. Its architecture is simple yet profound. A broad staircase leads directly from the temple doorway down to the water's edge, creating a physical and symbolic pathway between the world of the living and the watery abyss. This was not a temple for large public gatherings. It was a private, powerful stage for rituals conducted by a specialized priesthood. The act of descending the stairs was itself a ceremonial journey, a symbolic walk into the mouth of the earth monster. The temple served as a liminal space, a gateway where priests could prepare for their communion with the lords of Xibalba before making the final, fateful step to the water's surface to present their offerings. The archaeological work at Cara Blanca, led by University of Illinois archaeologist Lisa Lucero, has revealed just how profound these rituals were. Diving into the cenotes is a technically challenging and spiritually haunting endeavor. The water is often turbid with limited visibility, and the depths are silent and cold. Yet within these watery chambers, divers have recovered a stunning array of ceremonial offerings. They have found perfectly preserved pottery vessels, some still sealed with their contents intact, containing offerings of food, chocolate, and incense intended to appease the underworld gods. They have discovered precious jade celts carved with intricate designs, which were among the most valuable items in the Maya world, offered not as a casual gift but as a sacrifice of immense wealth. These finds confirm that Cara Blanca was a major pilgrimage site for over 1,000 years. a place where people traveled great distances to seek favor from the deities who controlled the fundamental cycles of life, death, and most importantly, water. This connection to water is the key to understanding Carablanca's enduring significance. The Maya world was critically dependent on rainfall. Prolonged droughts could and did cause catastrophic crop failure and societal collapse. The cenotes, as sources of water that never dried up, even in the most severe droughts, were therefore seen as places of immense supernatural power. The Maya believed that the rain deities, the Chocs, resided in these watery caverns. By making offerings at the cenotes, the priests were not just communing with the dead, they were pleading directly with the gods who controlled the weather. During times of drought, the rituals would have intensified, becoming increasingly desperate attempts to coax the Chocs out of their subterranean homes to bring life-giving rain to the parched land above. The choice to offer jade is particularly telling, as its color mirrored the coveted green of healthy maize and a well-watered world, a symbolic bribe to restore fertility to the earth. The most somber and controversial finds at Carablanca and similar cenotes throughout the Maya world point to the ultimate form of sacrifice. There is compelling evidence, including human remains recovered from the depths of these pools, that on certain highly charged ceremonial occasions, the Maya practiced human sacrifice here. These were not random acts of violence, but were likely reserved for periods of extreme crisis, such as a multi-year drought that threatened the survival of the entire community. The sacrifice, often of a young individual, was believed to be the most powerful offering possible, a life given to sustain the life of the kingdom. The victim would be adorned in finery, sometimes wearing jade jewels, and prepared for their journey into Xibalba, becoming a messenger to the gods. This grim practice underscores the high stakes involved. For the Maya, the cenotes were not just spiritual curiosities. They were vital pressure valves for a society living on the ecological edge, places where the fate of the world could be negotiated through the most extreme forms of piety. Temple 19 at Carablanca, therefore, represents a fundamentally different kind of sacred architecture. It is a temple of descent rather than ascent. While the pyramid at Kohenlik reached for the sun, this structure humbly bowed to the underworld. It acknowledges a core truth of the Maya worldview, that creation and destruction were two sides of the same coin, and that life itself emerged from the dark, watery void of Xibalba. The temple's power lies in its intimacy and its direct engagement with the raw, elemental forces of nature. It stands as a quiet but potent reminder that Maya spirituality was as much about the terrifying depths below as it was about the glorious heavens above, and that survival in their world required honoring both. While the temples at Carablanca witnessed rituals of survival for a civilization in its final throes, our journey through time now brings us to a place where the ancient world collided head-on with the new, and where Maya independence made its last defiant stand. Picture a vast, serene lake in the lowlands of Guatemala, Lake Patenitza, its shores thick with rainforest. In the 17th century, as Spanish rule was consolidating across most of the Americas, an island in the center of this lake was home to a thriving, fully independent Maya kingdom, Cival. This was the capital of the Itza Maya, a people who had watched the collapse of the classic city centuries earlier and had deliberately chosen this isolated, easily defended location as their refuge. For generations, they successfully repelled Spanish attempts at conquest, creating a unique time capsule where pre-Columbian Maya culture evolved in near-total isolation, long after the rest of the region had fallen under colonial control. The temples that would have greeted a Spanish scout in the late 1600s were a fascinating blend of ancient tradition and adaptation. They were built in what archaeologists call a late hybrid style. The core principles of Maya sacred architecture were still there, the raised platforms, the central stairways leading to temples atop, but the scale was different. These were not the colossal, sky-scraping pyramids of Tikal or El Mirador. They were more compact, more practical structures, yet no less important to the community. The construction materials and methods reflected centuries of uninterrupted development. The buildings were made of local limestone, and the facades were likely adorned with stucco masks of deities, but the artistic style would have shown subtle evolutions unseen elsewhere, a distinct Itza flavor. Imagine these whitewashed temples gleaming in the tropical sun, reflected in the lake's surface, a beautiful and proud statement of a culture that had successfully preserved its sovereignty against impossible odds. The Spanish, however, viewed this independence as an intolerable affront. For over a century they had known about Cival. They made periodic attempts at contact, sometimes sending friars to try and convert the Itza king. These encounters were tense and ultimately unsuccessful. The Itza, aware of the subjugation of their Maya kin in the Yucatan, were deeply suspicious and consistently refused Spanish demands for submission. The final confrontation was inevitable. In March of 1697, a well-armed Spanish expedition led by Martin de Ursua y Arizmendi arrived at the lake's shore. They had not come to negotiate, they had come to conquer. Ursua had a specially constructed, heavily armed galley ship, a terrifying sight on the inland lake, which he used to ferry his soldiers across to the island. The assault on Cival was swift and brutal. The Itza warriors, armed with spears and arrows, were no match for Spanish steel, firearms, and cavalry which had been brought over on barges. The kingdom that had held out for so long fell in a single bloody day. The Spanish victory was followed by an act of cultural annihilation. Viewing the Itza temples as monuments to idolatry and pagan beliefs, the Spanish soldiers and accompanying priests systematically destroyed them. They toppled the structures, smashed the stucco facades, and defaced the carvings. Using the very stones from the sacred pyramids, they built a Catholic church and a Spanish fort on the island, literally constructing their new order upon the rubble of the old. It was a deliberate, symbolic act meant to eradicate the spiritual heart of the Itza people and demonstrate the absolute supremacy of the Christian God. Yet the story of Cival is not solely one of destruction. It is more profoundly a powerful testament to the resilience of Maya culture. The physical temples were torn down, but the identity and knowledge of the people could not be so easily erased. In the centuries that followed, Maya communities throughout the region, including descendants of the Itza, continued to practice their traditions in secret, blending them with imposed Catholic rituals in a process known as syncretism. Today, the modern town of Flores sits atop the ancient island of Cival, its colorful buildings covering the archaeological remains, but the legacy is very much alive. Maya languages are still spoken, traditional agriculture is practiced, and ceremonies honoring the earth and ancestors continue. The destruction of 1697 marked the end of political sovereignty, but it did not mark the end of the Maya people. Cival represents the final chapter of a long era of independence, but it also serves as a poignant beginning to a new chapter of cultural endurance. A story of a people who, despite centuries of pressure, have maintained a profound connection to their history, their land, and the world view that their ancient temples were built to celebrate. But for a journey that truly transcends the boundary between the world above and the realm of the gods below, we must now undertake a pilgrimage into the very heart of the earth. In the dense, mountainous jungles of western Belize lies Acton Tunashil Muknal, often called the ATM Cave. The name translates to Cave of the Crystal Sepulchre, a title that only hints at the profound and chilling discoveries within. This is not a dry, dusty cavern. It is an active river cave, a place where entering requires a commitment that goes beyond a simple walk. To reach the entrance, you must first swim across a jade-green pool, the cave mouth yawning before you like a dark, gaping maw. From the very first moment, you are immersed both literally and symbolically in the underworld waters of Xibalba. The journey inside is a physical trial that would have mirrored the spiritual challenge faced by the ancient priests. You wade and swim through cool, chest-deep water, following the subterranean river as it winds deeper into the limestone mountain. The passage is often narrow, forcing you to squeeze between sculpted rock walls. At times, you must pull yourself up onto ledges, your way illuminated only by the beam of a headlamp, which casts dancing shadows on stalactites hanging like stone icicles from the ceiling. The sound is a constant, low roar of flowing water mixed with the dripping from above. This was not a journey for the public. It was a path reserved for a select few, the shaman priests who were trained to navigate both the physical dangers of the cave and the spiritual perils of the underworld. Every step deeper was a step further from the world of the living and closer to the seat of primordial power. After nearly a mile of this aquatic trek, you arrive at a place that feels utterly set apart. The river passage opens into a massive, soaring chamber known as the cathedral. Here, the water recedes, and you climb up onto a dry, dusty ledge. And it is here, in the absolute silence and darkness broken only by your light, that the true purpose of this place reveals itself. The chamber floor is littered with a breathtaking array of artifacts, left exactly as they were over 1,000 years ago. There are hundreds of pottery vessels, large, elegant storage jars, intricately painted plates, and delicate bowls. Many of these pots are killed, a ritual practice where a hole was deliberately punched in the bottom, symbolically releasing the vessel's spirit for use in the afterlife. These were not casual discards, they were precious offerings carried with great effort through the treacherous cave to be presented to the gods of Xibalba in their most sacred throne room. But among these artifacts, one site transcends archaeology and touches the realm of the deeply human and the haunting. This is the Crystal Maiden. She is the skeleton of a young woman, perhaps in her late teens or early 20s, who was left as a sacrifice in this chamber around the year 1000 of the Common Era. Over the centuries, a layer of sparkling calcite crystals has slowly formed over her bones, giving them a glittering, ethereal appearance in the light. Her skeleton is fully articulated, lying on its back, and the positioning suggests a specific, tragic end. One of her vertebrae is crushed, and her skull shows evidence of severe blunt force trauma, indicating she was likely sacrificed on the spot, her life offered to appease the deities of the underworld. The crystals that coat her remains make her seem both ancient and timeless, a permanent resident of this stone cathedral. She is not a display in a museum. She is still part of the ritual landscape, a silent witness to the desperate pleas of a civilization facing an uncertain future. The presence of the Crystal Maiden and the vast quantity of offerings in untold speak to a period of extreme crisis. The artifacts date primarily to the Terminal Classic period, the very era when the great Maya cities were being abandoned. The theory is that as traditional solutions failed, as rains did not come, crops withered, and the political order crumbled, the Maya turned to increasingly extreme measures. They went deeper into the earth, to more dangerous and potent locations, to beg for intervention from the most powerful gods. Sacrificing a young individual in the Maya worldview was the ultimate offering, a life given in the hope of renewing the life of the community. By performing this act in the deepest, most inaccessible part of the cave, the priests were delivering their message directly to the source, hoping to reach the ears of the gods when all other attempts had failed. The ATM cave is therefore a monument not to everyday worship, but to profound collective desperation. It is a sacred space that captures the final, heartbreaking efforts of a people trying to save their world by appealing to the powers of creation and destruction that resided in the darkness at the heart of the earth. Sometimes the story of a city begins not with the discovery of its pyramids, but with the scattered fragments of its memory. For decades, archaeologists knew of a place they called Site Q, a mysterious source of exquisitely carved stone panels that were appearing on the illicit antiquities market. These looted artifacts were beautiful, but they were orphans stripped of their context. The only consistent clue was a unique emblem glyph, a royal title that featured a band of stars. Epigraphers, the detectives of the ancient world, began piecing together the puzzle from texts found at other known cities. mentions of a place involved in the political dramas of the great snake kingdom of Calakmul kept appearing, a secondary center whose name seemed to be Saknikt, or White Flower. The evidence pointed to a significant settlement hidden somewhere in the dense rainforest between Guatemala and Mexico, but its physical location remained one of the last great geographical mysteries of the Maya world. The breakthrough came from a combination of old-fashioned exploration and a stroke of luck. In 1996, a team of archaeologists was following a trail used by looters, hoping it might lead to an undiscovered site. Their persistence paid off when they stumbled upon a breathtaking complex of temples and plazas, choked by vines but remarkably intact. They had found the real site Q. They named it La Corona, the crown, for the magnificent roof combs that still crowned its structures. The moment of discovery was a powerful vindication for the epigraphers. Their textual detective work had been correct. This was indeed Saknikt, the city of the Band of Stars glyph. The lost capital had been found, and it was ready to tell its story. La Corona's entire identity was shaped by its powerful and demanding neighbor, Calakmul. Located in a strategically vital position along a key overland trade route, La Corona was not a fully independent kingdom. It was a vassal, a crucial client state in the vast network of alliances that the Snake dynasty used to encircle and wage economic war against its great rival, Tikal. The rulers of La Corona were not powerless, but their power was contingent on their loyalty to the distant Snake kings. Their role was to maintain control of this logistical corridor, ensuring the flow of goods, information, and perhaps armies between Calakmul and its other allies. This relationship was the defining fact of life for the city's elite, a constant balancing act between local authority and subservience to a distant overlord. The mechanics of this alliance were often cemented not on the battlefield, but in the royal court through the strategic tool of marriage. In a stunning discovery, epigraphers deciphering texts at Calakmul itself found a reference to a royal wedding. A princess from the Snake dynasty, a woman named Lady Great Skull, was sent to La Corona to marry one of its kings. This was high-level diplomatic chess. By marrying his daughter into the ruling family of La Corona, the king of Calakmul was weaving a bond of blood and obligation that was far stronger than any simple treaty. It placed a direct representative of his own lineage in the heart of the vassal court, ensuring loyalty and providing a direct channel of influence. For the king of La Corona, this marriage was a double-edged sword. It brought immense prestige and the powerful backing of the region's superpower, but it also meant his dynasty's autonomy was forever compromised. The true treasure of La Corona, the discovery that transformed it from a historical footnote into a primary source, was unearthed more recently. Archaeologists excavating a palace structure uncovered a cache of beautifully carved stone panels that had been carefully buried by the Maya in antiquity, possibly to protect them during a time of unrest. These panels, now known as the La Corona panels, are a historical archive carved in stone. They contain a chronicle of the city's history, but their true significance is how they fill critical gaps in our understanding of the entire Snake Kingdom. The texts describe events from the perspective of La Corona's kings, offering a ground-level view of the machinations of Calakmul. One panel provides a particularly dramatic example. It records a period in the 7th century when the ruling line at Calakmul itself faced a crisis, possibly a usurpation or a period of weak leadership. During this power vacuum, the text tells us that a visiting king from Calakmul, perhaps a claimant to the throne, participated in a major ritual at La Corona. For the local king, hosting such a significant figure was a way to bolster his own status. But for historians, this single entry provides a crucial piece of evidence for a poorly understood chapter in the history of the Snake dynasty, an event that was likely erased from the official records at Calakmul itself. The La Corona panels act as a corrective, preserving a more complete and complex history that the dominant power might have preferred to forget. What makes these panels so invaluable is their survival. While the great monuments of Uxmal have suffered from centuries of erosion, and the fragile limestone has caused many of its inscriptions to fade into illegibility, the panels buried at La Corona were protected. Their crisp, deeply carved glyphs have survived with remarkable clarity, offering some of the most detailed and readable texts from this entire period. They provide names, dates, and specific verbs for actions like he arrived, he oversaw, and it happened. This linguistic precision allows epigraphers to reconstruct not just a list of kings, but a narrative of political relationships, obligations, and rituals. La Corona, once known only by its looted art, has become one of the most important sources for writing the political history of the classic Maya, proving that sometimes the most revealing stories come not from the centers of power, but from the careful records kept in the courts of their most loyal servants. Among the graceful, geometric structures of Uxmal, one pyramid captures the imagination like no other, a monument born not just from stone and mortar, but from the very fabric of Maya legend. This is the Pyramid of the Magician, a name that hints at its mythical origins. The story, passed down through generations, tells of a powerful, childless king who was challenged by a mysterious old woman. She prophesied that her grandson, a dwarf hatched from a turtle egg, would one day surpass the king in power. Enraged, the king set a series of impossible tasks for the dwarf, each one designed to kill him. The final and most daunting challenge was to construct a towering pyramid in a single night. As the story goes, the dwarf, with the help of his grandmother's magic and the very gods themselves, succeeded. When the sun rose, the pyramid stood complete, and the humbled king was forced to relinquish his throne, establishing a new dynasty. This enchanting myth speaks to a deeper truth about Uxmal, a place where the line between human achievement and divine intervention was always beautifully blurred. Even a first glance at the pyramid reveals its otherworldly character. Unlike the angular, square-based pyramids found throughout the Maya world, the Pyramid of the Magician has a distinctively rounded, almost elliptical base. This oval shape gives it a unique, organic presence, as if it were a living hill that had erupted from the earth rather than a structure built by human hands. The climb to its summit is a steep, breathtaking ascent, but the true architectural secret of the pyramid reveals itself as you look closer. It is not a single, unified structure, but rather a series of 5 distinct temples, each one built directly over the last like a set of nesting boxes. The two most prominent are the one you enter at the top, with its grand, gaping mouth of a doorway, and the older, beautifully preserved temple whose facade lies buried directly beneath it. The doorway at the summit is one of the most iconic and arresting features in all of Mesoamerica. It is designed as the gaping mouth of a giant, stylized mask of the Maya rain god, Choc. To pass through this doorway is to symbolically enter the maw of the deity himself, moving from the earthly realm into the sacred space within. This entire western facade of the pyramid is in fact a massive representation of the face of Choc, with the doorway as its mouth and the stepped layers of the pyramid forming its snout and brow. This was not a subtle architectural choice. It was a powerful, unmissable statement of the pyramid's primary purpose. Uxmal, for all its grandeur, was built in the Pook Hills, a region with no natural rivers or lakes. Survival here was entirely dependent on seasonal rains collected in man-made cisterns called choltuns. The favor of Choc was not a matter of spiritual preference, it was a matter of life and death. This desperate reliance on rain is carved into every corner of the pyramid in the form of Choc's unmistakable visage. His image is everywhere, his long, hooked nose, a symbol of lightning and rain clouds curling down from the cornices. Hundreds of these stone masks adorn the pyramid's corners and facades, their blank, staring eyes overseeing the city. They are not merely decorative, they are a continuous, collective prayer rendered in limestone. Each mask was a plea, a permanent invocation to the god to unlock the skies and fill the reservoirs. the rulers of Uxmal, by saturating their most prominent temple with the face of chalk, were publicly demonstrating their special connection to this vital force, positioning themselves as the essential intermediaries who could ensure the city's survival through their rituals and divine favor. This connection between the ruler and the cosmos was engineered into the pyramid's very alignment. Like the governor's palace we discussed earlier, the pyramid of the magician was precisely calibrated to interact with the heavens. Its primary staircase faces almost due west, and on the evening of the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, a remarkable event would unfold. As the sun began its descent, it would set directly behind the pyramid. For those gathered in the main plaza, the dying rays of the sun would perfectly silhouette the temple at the summit, creating a brilliant, fiery outline. This celestial alignment transformed the pyramid into a giant solar marker. The summer solstice was a critical point in the agricultural calendar, signaling the imminent arrival of the rainy season. The dramatic spectacle of the sun setting behind the pyramid, itself a giant effigy of the rain god, was a piece of cosmic theater designed to show the people that their king was in harmony with the most powerful forces of nature. He could command the sun to mark the time for chalk to release the rains, weaving together astronomy, architecture, and religion into a single, undeniable demonstration of his right to rule. The Pyramid of the Magician, therefore, stands as a multi-layered marvel, a building of myth, a stack of historical phases, a monumental prayer for water, and a precise astronomical instrument, all woven into one unforgettable silhouette against the Yucatan sky. Our journey now takes us to a site that offers a uniquely poignant and intimate perspective on the Great Maya collapse. While Aguatka's ruins spoke of a violent, catastrophic end, and Caracol's LiDAR maps revealed a sprawling metropolis gradually reclaimed by nature, the city of Queuic presents a different kind of mystery. Nestled in the rolling, dry forests of the Puc Hills in Yucatan, Queuic is not a place of grand, towering pyramids. It is a community of modest, elegant buildings perched on hilltops, a settlement that seems to have been put on pause rather than destroyed. The story it tells is not one of fiery conquest or slow decline, but of a planned departure, a quiet interruption that feels almost hauntingly recent. The archaeological work at Queuic, led by researchers from Millsaps College, uncovered a scene that stopped them in their tracks. As they excavated the simple stone palaces and household platforms, they did not find evidence of a desperate flight or a destructive attack. Instead, they found a snapshot of daily life, frozen in a moment of orderly suspension. In one kitchen area, a metatere, the large basalt grinding stone used for preparing maize, was found resting neatly in its place, as if the woman who used it had just set it down. Pottery vessels were left intact on shelves and floors. Tools and other personal belongings were not scattered in panic but were stored away, suggesting the inhabitants had tidied up before they left. It was as if the entire community had simply walked away from their homes one day, fully intending to come back when whatever crisis had prompted their departure had passed. This deliberate, orderly abandonment points to a powerful external trigger, and the evidence strongly points to a single, overwhelming culprit, a catastrophic, prolonged drought. The time frame for Queuic's depopulation is remarkably precise, centered around the year 880, a period that aligns perfectly with climate data gathered from lakebed sediments and stalagmites throughout the region. These natural archives reveal a period of exceptionally low rainfall that stretched for decades, a mega-drought that would have crippled the Mayas' ability to feed themselves. For the people of the Puc region, this was an existential threat. Unlike cities built near rivers, Queuic relied entirely on capturing seasonal rain in vast underground cisterns called choltuns. When the rains failed year after year, these vital reserves would have dwindled to nothing. The orderly abandonment suggests the community made a collective, rational decision. Facing starvation, they likely decided to migrate en masse to areas with more reliable water sources, perhaps the coasts or the great cenotes further north, leaving their homes behind in the hope of a future return. What makes Ciuic so profoundly moving is that it allows us to see the collapse not as a grand historical event, but as a deeply personal human tragedy. We can imagine the final days, the community leaders holding council as the cisterns ran dry, the anxious discussions between families, the difficult choice to leave behind generations of history and the homes they had built with their own hands. The neatly stored possessions are a testament to their hope. They did not burn their houses or smash their pottery in a final act of despair. They closed the door, believing that one day, when the rains returned, they would come back to sweep the floors, reposition the metaterre, and resume their lives. This small detail transforms the Maya collapse from an abstract archaeological concept into a story of heartbreaking resilience and quiet dignity. Of course, that return never happened. The rains may have eventually returned, but by then, the political and economic networks that had supported life in the Puuc Hills had disintegrated. The world they left behind had changed irrevocably. Their descendants may have integrated into other communities, and the memory of Ciuic faded into the landscape. The city's unique story provides a crucial piece of the puzzle. It shows that the collapse was not a uniform process. In some places, it was violent and sudden. In others, like Ciuic, it was a managed response to an environmental disaster. The people of Ciuic were not passive victims of their fate. They were pragmatic survivors who made a calculated choice to preserve their community, even if it meant leaving their physical home behind. Their abandoned city stands as a silent, powerful monument to the human capacity for hope in the face of overwhelming adversity, a place where the echo of an intended return still lingers in the dust. And so our journey through the forgotten temples of the Maya brings us to the final chapter, not in the deep rainforest but on the arid plains of the northern Yucatan. Here, rising from the dry, scrubby landscape, are the imposing walls of Mayapan. If the story of the Maya were a book, Mayapan would be its dramatic, violent epilogue. It was the last great capital, a city that emerged from the ashes of the classic collapse with a bold ambition to resurrect a unified Maya state. But its story is one of grim irony, a conscious attempt to recreate past glory that ultimately succumbed to the very same demons of internal strife that had toppled its predecessors centuries before. Walking through the ruins of Mayapan today, you are immediately struck by its dense, fortified character. Unlike the sprawling, open-plan cities of the classic period like Tikal, Mayapan is compact, almost claustrophobic. A massive, circular defensive wall, over 5 miles long and studded with narrow gates, encloses an area of just over 2 square miles. Inside, nearly 4,000 structures are crammed together: temples, palaces, and simple residential platforms, all connected by a labyrinth of narrow streets. This was not a city designed for ceremonial grandeur. It was a fortified administrative and military hub, a citadel built for control. At its peak in the 13th and 14th centuries, it was home to perhaps 12,000 people, making it the political and cultural heart of the entire peninsula, a deliberate consolidation of power in an unstable world. The spiritual and symbolic center of this new order was the city's main temple, a structure that speaks volumes about Mayapan's aspirations. It is an unmistakable, though smaller, copy of the great El Castillo at Chichen Itza. The rulers of Mayapan were not trying to hide their inspiration. They were openly invoking the authority of the once great city that had dominated the region before them. By replicating its most iconic pyramid, they were making a powerful political statement. They were claiming to be the legitimate heirs to the Itza lineage and the sacred traditions of Chichen Itza, positioning Mayapan as the new, centralized seat of a pan-Yucatec Maya League. This architectural quotation was a tool of legitimacy, an attempt to borrow the prestige of a golden age to solidify their own rule. Yet, the differences between the two pyramids are as telling as their similarities. The copy at Mayapan is cruder, built with rougher stonework and less precise proportions. it lacks the breathtaking astronomical precision of its model. This degradation in quality hints at a society that could remember the forms of the past, but had perhaps lost some of the refined knowledge and specialized craftsmanship that had made the original possible. It was a symbol of power, but one that felt more imitative than innovative, reflecting a culture looking backward for stability rather than forward with confidence. This fragile stability was shattered in the most brutal way. The end of Mayapan was not brought about by a foreign invader or a mysterious environmental catastrophe. It was a death from within. Archaeological excavations have uncovered grim evidence scattered across the city center. In the main plaza, and even inside the royal palace itself, archaeologists found mass graves containing the remains of dozens of young men and women. The skeletons showed clear signs of violent death: skulls crushed by blunt force trauma, rib cages pierced by spear points, and vertebrae sliced by obsidian blades. These were not carefully arranged burials. These were victims of a sudden, vicious massacre. The most compelling interpretation, supported by later Spanish chronicles based on Maya accounts, is that Mayapan fell to a massive popular uprising. The ruling Copán family, who had held power for generations, had become increasingly authoritarian. They formed close alliances with Mexican mercenaries from the Gulf Coast, who were stationed in the city as a personal guard, a move that likely bred resentment among the local population. The final trigger was an act of betrayal by a rival noble family, the Ziu. According to the histories, the Ziu orchestrated a revolt that rallied the discontented populace. The Copán compound was stormed, and every member of the ruling family found within the walls was put to the sword. Only one heir, who was away on a trading mission, survived to carry on the lineage. The city was sacked, its central buildings burned, and its political alliance shattered forever. The survivors simply walked away, scattering to smaller, safer towns, leaving the capital to the elements. The abandonment of Mayapan around the year 1450 is a moment of profound historical resonance. It happened less than a century before the first Spanish ships would arrive off the coast of the Yucatan. When the Spanish made contact, they did not find a unified Maya kingdom capable of organized resistance. They found a fractured landscape of small, competing city-states, still reeling from the recent collapse of their last great capital. The fall of Mayapan effectively ensured that there would be no centralized power to oppose European conquest. But more than that, its story holds up a dark mirror to the entire sweep of Maya history. The city's demise, driven by internal political rivalries, over-centralization of power, and popular unrest, eerily echoes the factors that led to the collapse of the classic cities like Tikal and Palenque some 500 years earlier. It suggests a cyclical pattern, a recurring flaw in the Maya political model where the very concentration of power necessary to build great cities also planted the seeds for their eventual violent fragmentation. Mayapan stands as a poignant final testament to this cycle, a last flourish that proved the most difficult lessons of history are often the ones we are doomed to repeat. From the sun-drenched coastal walls of Chilam to the perpetual twilight of Acton Tunishil Muknal, our journey across the Maya world has spanned over 2,000 years of human history. We have stood in the shadow of preclassic giants like El Mirador, where civilizations achieved staggering scale before vanishing into an early silence. We have walked the plazas of classic-era powerhouses like Caracol and Copán, where kings inscribed their glory in stone, only to see their dynasties consumed by the very warfare that defined them. And we have witnessed the resilient final chapters written in post-classic citadels like Mayapan, where the lessons of the past were tragically forgotten. These 25 temples are not a monolithic story. They are a symphony of individual voices, each representing a unique community, a distinct ruler, and a specific moment in the long, complex arc of Maya civilization. Despite their incredible diversity, certain powerful threads weave through all of them, connecting the earliest structures to the last. We see an unshakable obsession with celestial precision, from the E-Group Observatory at Cival tracking the equinox sun to the governor's palace at Uxmal, a building engineered into a Venusian sightline. We feel a profound connection to the underworld, whether in the sacred cave of Naj Tunish, adorned with personal prayers, or the cenotes of Cara Blanca, where offerings were made to the rain gods in their watery abode. The spectacle of kingship is a constant, from the monumental stucco masks at Kohenlik that transformed rulers into sun gods to the vivid murals of Bonampak that documented the brutal theater of war and sacrifice. And hanging over it all is the enduring, haunting mystery of abandonment, a mystery that is not one single event but 1,000 individual silences, from the orderly departure from Kiyuik to the fiery destruction of Aguetka. These stones continue to speak to us not in a language of easy answers, but in a chorus of challenging questions. They ask us to consider what it takes to build a society that can endure for centuries, and what vulnerabilities can cause even the most brilliant to falter. They force us to look beyond simple explanations of drought or warfare, and to see the collapse as a complex unraveling of a deeply interconnected system, where political ambition could outstrip environmental capacity, and where religious beliefs that once provided stability could become a recipe for unsustainable sacrifice. The Maya world is a mirror held up to our own civilization, reminding us that our achievements are never permanent and that our relationship with the environment is the most fundamental contract of all. So the next time you see a picture of a pyramid half swallowed by the jungle, remember that it is more than a ruin. It is a frozen moment, a library wall, a king's boast, and a community's desperate prayer. These temples are monuments to human genius, ambition, and resilience. They challenge us to listen closely to the echoes of the past, for in understanding their story, we may just learn something vital about our own. We would love to hear which of these forgotten temples captured your imagination the most. Was it the cosmic ambition of Uxmal, the tragic story of Dos Pilas, or the intimate spirituality of the ATM cave? Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this journey into the heart of the Maya world, be sure to subscribe. We have many more historical mysteries to